Yeah, exactly. So you can look at your own. You've got your own. So I'm not even going to worry about the stupid.cam. Tell me what goes first. All right. So I need to mark that off. What dates did you give me?
200s.
200s?
200s through 476.
200s? 200s?
That's when it started, right?
No, not in the 200s.
Is it 410?
I put 410.
You don't need to be that specific.
400.
400s. No, but no. I mean,
476.
barbarian invaders haven't broken into the empire in the 200s.
They're just trying to.
They're trying to. They're becoming more effective. They're forcing the Romans to really build up their armies out of the borders. So rather than using armies to improve things, improve living conditions, more and more taxes are being raised and armies are having to be used to do just the basic job of keeping the barbarians out. But then you get up to the 400s and the barbarians are actually breaking into the empire. We could actually start it in the late 300s, but I made a point not to do that because I had that confused my students last semester, so I made a note to myself because the very first incursion into the empire is with the Battle of Adrianople there in 378, but don't worry about it. 400s. 400s is just fine. So what now? Right, so manorialism is developing. Where is that?
It's like 5 and 4 down.
There we go. So yeah, so as those barbarians then are really being felt, people are freaking out. They're fleeing the cities, and then they're fleeing the towns, and urbanization is disappearing. What now? We ready for the Vikings?
Ready for the Vikings.
Ready to jump a few hundred years? What timing are you giving me for the Vikings? Yeah, the 800s and the 900s, and then they're settling in, but they've led to what?
The first age of feudalism.
First age of feudalism, which is one of those factors that brings a higher level of order and helps bring on the High Middle Ages. What do we have now?
The climate for sure.
Climate is another one that helps bring a higher level of order.
1050.
So what now?
The Romanesque cathedrals.
Are we ready to move into the High Middle Ages?
Kings are second age feudalism.
Yeah, kings are trying to centralize their power. Who's the very first one to, the kings are trying to step into the first age of feudalism. Where is that?
It's just above.
Okay, kings start working to get power over their vassals. Who's the first king that actually is able to do it? William, Duke of Normandy. That was William the Conqueror. What now? Yeah, so yeah, the art form of the first part of the High Middle Ages is Romanesque. We're in the 1100s. What now? Huh? Yeah, late 1100s. Henry II is putting his stamp on the future of the English judicial system. So that's late 1100s. What now? You guys are mumbling. I can't hear. Are we ready to move into the 1200s with Gothic cathedrals? Okay, what else in the 1200s?
Magna Carta.
Magna Carta, that would be a definite one to go ahead and bring in since that's 1215, early 1200s. What now? I'm sorry? We ready to move to the late 1200s with Edward? Building those castles and needing to widen Parliament to explain why he needs more taxes. So have we done everything we can do in the 1200s?
Wait, we feel like we skipped one.
What do we skip? I'm just trusting you guys.
No, he was the first true
I've already-
king,
I've
and
already-
then he laid the foundation.
I've
down.
already,
Henry
that's Henry VIII.
That's why you have that.
Henry II is not Henry VIII.
Right,
Henry
Henry
II
II
is a medieval king
That came after the Duke of Norfolk.
who makes his stamp on the English judicial system.
Did you put the
I mean, that's just on
Duke of
timeline. That's just timeline. So we're in the. Are we ready to leave the 1200s?
Yes.
Is there anything else? I'm not seeing anything else. So we'll move into that century of woe. Tell me about what's going on in this century of woe.
Right away,
Okay, the decline of the power and prestige of the popes. You can bring that one in. Where is that?
Right under almost all the way down.
There we go. Decline of the power and prestige of the popes. What else in the 1300s?
Yeah.
Giotto, yes. Medieval, but definitely transitional. There he is in the early 1300s.
he's below Henry VIII.
Yeah, I've got him. I knocked him out. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. We're not even trying. But yeah, he's knocked out. What now? Yeah, mid 1300s. The Black Death is ravaging. Anything else here in the 1300s? Okay. So, shall we move into the 1400s? In the 1400s, in one place, northern Italy, we are moving into the Renaissance, but elsewhere we are still in the Middle Ages. What are you going to give me for the early 1400s? Battle of Agincourt. Okay. What now? Yeah, so we've got our early Fra Angelico. What now? Are we ready for Ghiberti? Everybody ready for Ghiberti? Ghiberti sculpting his Gates of Paradise. Mid, early Renaissance. What now? Now we're getting into ones that that we'll be covering today.
I have Vasari and
Vasari is
1530.
yeah. The key is the Mannerist style. If you look carefully at your
We have Botticelli.
yeah, but the Mannerist style is what comes after the High Renaissance. So that should be pretty clear on the timeline. I think I'm glad that I waited I think we needed. Okay, so Botticelli,
Yeah.
late 1400s. Anything else going on in the late 1400s?
Christopher Columbus.
Yes, Christopher Columbus is beginning early American history. Little does he know. 1492, he sails the ocean blue. And thus begins the process that will eventually lead to English colonization. All right, what now? So we are moving into the early 1500s with Henry VIII. So in many ways, still pretty, I mean, Henry VIII in his own, even though we talk about him as the first national monarch, he was still pretty medieval there in the early 1500s up there in England. But meanwhile, down in Italy, what's the deal? Yes, Michelangelo is sculpting his High Renaissance David. We'll meet him today and we get to your course pack cover. Too cool?
About time.
It's about time, I'm telling you. What now?
Vasari.
Yeah, then we get beyond the High Renaissance. We have artists getting bored with High Renaissance style and beginning experimenting. We'll be getting to that today. What now?
Shakespeare.
We're getting to the late 1500s. Are we ready for late 1500s, early 1600s, and Shakespeare?
Yep. So, can I ask what did you guys use for your citation on this? Because Drew actually said mid 1590s in class.
But that
That's
you
correct.
never cite lecture.
Right. So I didn't cite anything, but did anybody find that someplace else that you actually had a citation?
Remember,
Okay.
you cite what you can cite.
Yeah, I just didn't
with
know
your
if
with
there
your
was something
materials.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't put anything on it. 'Cause I heard that in class.
All right, so are we ready for our final one? All right, yes. Late 1600s, 1688, the Glorious Revolution, using the Magna Carta, the House and Commons as a representative body of the English people gets the sole power to pass laws. We are done. All righty. So let's finish up Donatello's David, hoping that the stupid .cam will be easy on us. What are we looking at there?
That's the,
What are we looking at in this slide? Huh? What structure is this that you need to know for your exam? As you're taking me on a stroll through Renaissance Florence. It was the last thing we talked about. It's where Donatello's David is. In the interior courtyard. It's where Mr. Capone and Bill Moyers were talking about Donatello and the Medici Palace. Yeah, we're looking at the Medici Palace. And in that interior courtyard, the reason they were sitting there is because that is where Donatello's David was. You look at your timeline, what do I say about Donatello's David? I actually write something in there because we're going to be contrasting his David with Michelangelo's David.
This David needs God.
His David needs God to slay the
Goliath. That's
slay the giant. So there's the giant. He's been slayed, and you know, this is such a neat way they've got the museum organized, because we can see the St. George back here so completely dressed because Donatello had no idea how to show a human body. Now Donatello has learned enough about the human body to sculpt this sculpture. And your film will be talking about how Donatello is capturing that moment where boys can look like girls and girls can look like boys. They're so young, 12 years old. And biblically, that is, he's following the Bible there. But another reason to do it this way is because if he keeps David really young, what does he not have to fully understand? The body, all the musculature. This is depicting a young boy before he's developed those muscles. So here in the mid-early Renaissance, we haven't learned all that we're going to learn about the human body. And it's going to really be the high Renaissance artists that make the giant breakthroughs there. So that is definitely another reason for why he would keep David so young. And we'll just leave that there and get back to our film watching, if our camera lets us.
He had the staff qualities and the staff jobs.
It was Cosimo de' Medici who commissioned a statue by the stonemason to whom he had become both patron and friend, Donatello. Cosimo wanted the work for his garden. When it was finished, it was so radical that today we see it as transforming the history of art. Donatello's David, the first freestanding nude figure since the time of the Greeks and Romans.
Donatello has finally broken completely free from the niche. It's no longer statuary locked into an architectural setting, the way the St. George is, standing there in his niche, however bravely, still unable to really emerge from it. This is not the David of the first book of Samuel in the Bible, who, filled with the courageous belief that God would give him strength, goes out and slays Goliath. This is anything but heroic. It's almost androgynous.
male and female.
To some extent, it is because Donatello himself has, I think, wanted to capture that delicate moment in adolescence when girls can look like boys, when boys can look a bit like girls. This dreamy adolescent, lost in a kind of reverie, as if immersed in the contemplation of his own beauty, is as close as the Renaissance came to actually recreating the pagan sensuality, the love of physical beauty for its own sake of classical antiquity. It's an amazing shift from the Donatello of the first decades of the century.
Would this have shocked the Florentines? Would this have been a scandalous?
Without any question, had it been exhibited to most Florentines, it would have caused problems. This was made, though, for a private place. This is not like the St. George, the Jeremiah, the public works of the early years. This is a piece of luxury art aimed at a highly refined public that takes pleasure in knowing that it alone has the sophistication to really grasp what is going on. It's displayed in the inner courtyard of a rich man's palace. Only the privileged few get to see it.
Did this mean that art had reached the stage of existing for its own sake, art for art's sake?
To some extent. Here in Donatello, we come as close practically as the 15th century ever did to something that is like the mere celebration of beauty.
So who controlled the art prior to the Renaissance? What controlled the art prior to the Renaissance? What controlled the art prior? What commission?
The church.
I'm sorry?
The church.
The church, exactly. You can see the role of these lay patrons, these non-church affiliated patrons, in bringing about the changes. There's what they want in art. They're interested in other things besides simply the symbolic religious story. The early Renaissance is a very stressful time for artists because, on the one hand, they are touched by all these Renaissance elements, and then their patrons are asking for these elements in their art. The church is making them feel very guilty, and they're not sure if they're doing the right thing.
Cease, but which will never stop.
So that's going to be one of our themes today as we finish up the early Renaissance and move into the high Renaissance. So we are then mid-early, and it's time to look at some mid-early painting. So we've been looking at sculpture, painting, and we do that through slides. One more shot of Donatello's David. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually a piece that you can actually drive to here in the United States. If you drive about 12 hours to Washington, D.C. and go into the National Gallery of Art, you will see this. This is Fra Filippo Lippi's Madonna and Child. The name Fra, and for some reason, well, I'll hold back on the story. The name Fra tells you what about Fra Filippo Lippi? A monk. He's been known that, but he actually has a much more complicated story. Compared to Fra Angelico's Madonna and Child that we looked at last time, early Renaissance Madonna, this is mid-early. What's happening with the Madonna herself? What's different?
Yeah.
Well, the Fra Angelica one did look human. I remember she even looked female, but she was also very what? No, she wasn't big. By we get into the Renaissance, we're making Mary to scale.
Was she the one who was sitting down?
She's sitting down,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not. I'm sorry. I'm talking about just looking at Mary herself. You're right. The halo has become much less pronounced. It's still there, but it's much less pronounced. But what else did we say about Fra Angelico's Madonna? In order to be, he's too much of the society not to be painting her as female and to scale. She's human. but he also kept her very what? Very young. Yeah, that's an important detail. So one of the themes of the early Renaissance here is that as we get more comfortable with these religious figures, thinking about them as human, we can think more, Mary can grow up. We get more comfortable with Mary being more, of the age. It would make more sense. So, then, this Mary is around, 16, 17 years old. So she's getting older. She's becoming, as we go through time, you'll see her become more womanly. How about the baby? How are we doing with the baby? Actually a baby, but still not holding on to him very, he's sitting on this window ledge, and she doesn't look at all concerned. He's still very much Christ, the God, but he's got little babyish hands. But if you look at his face is pretty knowing, and that's a serious head of hair for such a young child. So, we're making inroads. But let's now talk about Fra Filippo Lippi himself. I think his life speaks volumes. So he went into the orders, as they say. He became a monk when he was young. But he's in this changing society, and he's finding himself thinking more worldly thoughts than he had expected that he would. Remember what you do is you are separating yourself from all the most human earthly pleasures when you become a monk. You're getting as far away from that, and you're devoting yourself to God. But he's finding himself spending a lot of time looking at a beautiful young nun that he is falling in love with, and she's falling in love with him. Now we're talking doing something really bad. If you have taken your vows and then you start thinking about breaking them, well, they don't just think about breaking them; they do break them, and they run away. Luckily for Fra Filippo Lippi and his beloved, his work is much beloved by Cosimo, and Cosimo has really strong ties to the Pope. And so he's able to get them a dispensation. They actually go on. I mean, what happened was it became very obvious when she got pregnant. That's when they knew they were in serious trouble. But they actually go on, and they're husband and wife. They have 2 children. But here's the kicker. Here's the awesome thing. Do we know what Mary looked like? Do we know what Mary looked like? We have no idea what Mary looked like. So when you look at Mary, it is what the artist is conceiving of Mary to have looked like. Fra Filippo Lippi. Mary.
Oh, his Mary,
His
or whatever her
Mary.
name was.
Yes. Well, and you heard Sidney Alexander saying she becomes one's, sweetheart, one's wife. He doesn't feel weird about that. This woman that he's having sex with. He's thinking Mary more about the living, breathing, womanly woman that she would have been. So he's really breathing life into his Mary by thinking about her as the woman that he's in love with. So pretty awesome. Big thing about mid-early Renaissance artists is they're really obsessed with figuring out the techniques of realism. They're really more interested in that than they are the figures with a lot of them. We're going to another map ID. We're going to San Marco Monastery. San Marco Monastery is where Fra Angelico lived and where he did a lot of his painting. And you're looking at a mid-early Fra Angelico, and that's one that I've taken, and it's not as good quality as I'd like. So I'm going to use another professional slide. But this is what it actually looks like in terms of the halos, because for whatever reason, the slide that I'm about to show you shows the halos as black. It's just, I don't know, some kind of weird glitch. The halos were actually gold. And you can see that with Fra Angelico, he never does give up those halos. I mean, we're mid-early. Fra Filippo Lippi has made them just a little wisp, and others are doing that too, but others like Fra Angelico, there's only so far he can go. He's in this society, he's part of this movement, but when it comes to the actual figures, there's only so far he can go. So let's go and look at a little bit better version, but once again, the the halos are not black, they're gold, as you were just seeing, but very interested in capturing floors and walls, meeting floors, and realistic columns, that sort of thing. And you know, we're the first ones to do this since the Romans, so we have no idea what we're doing. We're art students without the teacher. We're having to teach ourselves, so we need to respect these guys, but we can't help but point out some kind of obvious issues here. This, by the way, is what's the term for this? See, enunciation. And you can see that Fra Angelico just isn't going to go very far with his figures in terms of capturing warm human. She's a little older than the one that we were looking at when we looked at this early, but you know, he's just not putting that much effort into them. It's much more about walls and ceilings and whatnot. And note, by the way, that he stops here. He gives you a fence so that he doesn't have to show that he has no idea how to do foreground, middle ground, and background. So to keep from having to even try, you put a fence or something like that. Very, very typical here with these early Renaissance artists. But what's going to happen when these two stand up? I'm sorry? They're going to hit their heads on the ceiling because they're too tall. So, and that's, it's not fair. I mean, once again, these are art students without the teachers. So, you know, we put out art like this, and then we kind of, you know, but we're learning, and we're really kind of sharing with each other what we're learning. Hey, I figured out the, you know, the disappearing line. I'm figuring this out. I'm figuring that out. So, so really, it's kind of a raging movement of art students trying to figure out how to create a three-dimensional, human, realistic realm on their flat surface of their canvas. This is just another one of Fra Angelico's. I think it really, I mean, his, this is mid-early, but the face here is just so early, just really almost kind of regressing back to medieval. So yeah, he's just not going to go that far with the figures. Francesca has been called the father of modern painting because he made so many breakthroughs. And that's who you're looking at here. You're looking at Francesca. This is the flagellation of Christ. And there you see Christ. But once again, if you look really carefully at the faces, you see that Francesca's just not that interested. He's much more interested in the breakthroughs he's making in terms of walls, ceilings, floors meeting walls, realistic columns. You can see all, you know, like Fra Angelico, we're not making big inroads in foreground, middle ground, background. This is all pretty foreground, and then you've got the figure and the wall here keeping him from having to show any more. You've got those trees just kind of rising up beyond. Now we're seeing the very early signs of a huge aspect in terms of showing us the growing individualism, and that's early portraits. That when you're looking at Uccello, you can see Uccello there is under the later Fra Angelicos. This is a painting by Uccello. It's called today Portrait of a Man because we don't know who it was, but somebody, his family probably, commissioned a portrait because they want his likeness. And so that kind of thing, seeing portraits. You know, the ancient Romans were big into portraits in the form of busts, but you know, that pride had been one of the 7 deadly sins, and that had really been emphasized in the Middle Ages. But we're coming out of that, and we're kind of becoming less concerned about that and more interested in people's likenesses. But here's the thing: the theme that we're going to follow as we go from the mid-early to the late early to the high. Is how they become more interested in who the actual person is in terms of their personality. Right now, nothing, nada. This is the outside of this person. We have no idea what's going on in his head or what his personality is like or anything like that. So this is typical of these very early portraits. Our final mid-early painter is Uccello before we go to late early. And this is a depiction of a battle scene. It's just one of the many battles that were fought between Florence and Siena in this period. so not necessary for us to get into. But it's, once again, I feel kind of badly. I don't, it's not really fair. These guys are making big breakthroughs. They're putting themselves out there to be ridiculed by us 500 years later. But I think this helps a little bit more. He's got rabbits leaping around way back there in the distant background. Those are rabbits. So that's distant background. What's going to happen if you bring these rabbits up?
They're gonna be the size of the horses.
They're going to be the same size as the horses. Giant rabbits, monster rabbits. So yeah, and once again, I feel badly, I mean, like I said, they're putting themselves out there. They're trying something that no one knows how to do. But that's the sort of thing they've got to figure out as we go on into the late early Renaissance and then into high Renaissance and beyond. Well, our final slide for this carousel before I switch over is Botticelli's Primavera. We're going to make a big deal about Botticelli because there's so much going on. He's by the way, he's taken us into the late early Renaissance, as you know from preparing your chronology. But let's talk about how much we are in the late early Renaissance. His patron is Lorenzo de' Medici, the son of Cosimo. Cosimo has died and Lorenzo has taken over, basically ruling Florence. And Lorenzo is really into all this new Renaissance stuff. Classical revival, it's time to really bring classical revival. And we are really into reading, the Aristotle and Plato and you name it, whatever we can get our hands on. And we want to see pagan scenes in art. We also want to see a little nudity. Lorenzo definitely is telling Botticelli, give me a little skin there, a little female skin, that is. And Lorenzo is very into a movement called Neoplatonism, and you can read about this when you go. If you go, once again, it's not a requirement, but if you do go and use the art books, let me know, just by bringing in just a little bit. I mean, once again, this is not a research paper, but I'd like to know that you did make that effort, if you were one of those that did. Go and you're looking. The art books are all sticky noted with little notes from me and reminders and what time period and whatnot. And there you can get to know Neoplatonism a little bit more if you like. It's a very interesting movement. It's kind of our way of being really interested in the pagan religion, and at the same time, making it clear that we're good Christians. Because what you are into is pagan scenes, and that's what this is. Well, let me tell you what's going on here. Primavera is Italian for springtime, and so this is spring, and these are pagan gods and goddesses frolicking because it's spring and everyone's happy, and we're going to take our clothes off and do some love. There's Mars, the god of war. There's the three graces, and you can see they got those little very see-through garments. There's Cupid shooting his arrows of love. Here's a wind zephyr chasing this nymph who may be transmuting into Flora, the goddess of vegetation. No one's absolutely sure. But in the middle, definitely, is Venus, or, of course, for the Greeks, Aphrodite, the goddess of sexual love. So she's the goddess of sexual love. She had sex with a lot of different gods, like Mars. But look at her here. Does she look like she's about to jump into somebody's bed? What's her face? Who's her face? Who is she?
Mary.
Mary. Yes, the pious, serene Mary. So what Neoplatonism is Christian implications onto a pagan scene. So you're into all this pagan stuff, you're into learning about the gods and goddesses and whatnot. At the same time, you want to make it clear, but you know, I'm a good Christian, so you want you want some Christian implication. And if you look at all these figures, they all have that kind of serene, pious look. The next one is even better for that. This one, very, very famous. Oh shoot, it's on the next one. That's right, I stop here and then we go to that. That's, I wish I had one of them here. So later on, we will see the birth of Venus. Let's now go back to our film. Hopefully the film watching will let us go back to our film. And we are learning about Brunelleschi's dome. Now, I've just got Brunelleschi right here in the early Renaissance. I don't have him as early, mid-early, or late early. I know I just have him plopped there, so you don't need to think of him as early, mid-early, or late early. He is helping us with architecture. So we're going to be making a big deal about him. You've met him. He was also an artist, but he makes his big splash in architecture. And what he is ultimately designing is a huge reason everyone wants to go to Italy, to see his incredible dome. So here's the thing. Who were the last people to build a huge, perfect dome? What structure had the last huge dome? The Pantheon, there we go. And the Pantheon drives these Christians up the wall. Those pagans could do something that we can't do. No one's been able to do it. So what Florence does is it builds a brand new cathedral. That's what we see when we go and see it. They built it back in the Middle Ages, and they just decided they were going to have a dome. But no one knows how to do a dome. So without further ado, let's go and let the film tell us the story.
Fully and in detail happens at the beginning of the 15th century. The cupola for the Cathedral of Florence, the Duomo, was Brunelleschi's greatest achievement and the architectural glory of both Florence and the Renaissance. Begun in the 13th century, the cathedral was to be the most magnificent church Florentines could imagine. A century later, it stood almost complete, but for one stupefying problem. Where there should have been a mighty dome was a void, a gaping hole open to the sky. They had not anticipated the magnitude of the technological problems, so in typical Florentine fashion, they held a competition.
Many architects arrived on the scene. Florentine architects and architects from other cities. Brunelleschi was one of the artists interested in getting this project, which would have assured him fame to eternity. What happened? Well, it wasn't easy. There were lots of problems involved. Brunelleschi wanted this commission desperately. We could feel that. And he had to argue constantly with the committee. Simply because Brunelleschi, when asked how he would cover the dome, was refraining from giving a clear answer. They would say, tell us how it is. Exactly. They wanted the hard reality. Tell us how you will do it. Show us a model. Show us the technique. And Brunelleschi did not want to do that. Brunelleschi was a very temperamental man, full of passion. Typical Florentine, we may say. When he was asked, as a matter of fact, how you're going to do it, he says, this is none of your business. Give me the commission and I will do it. And also one must not forget that there were the other architects, envious of him, who were trying to get this commission under his feet.
How did we get it then?
There is a story narrated by Vasari, 16th century author and biographer of many important artists from Giotto onward, which tell us that Brunelleschi says, okay, you should give the commission of this project to the architect who will know how to make an egg stand on a flat surface.
An egg standing
on a flat surface.
On its end.
On its end.
Well, that's impossible.
Obviously, everybody wanted to try it, so each architect, did the miracles of equilibrium, but obviously the egg wouldn't stand on its own. So Brunelleschi just took the hand with his own hand and he said, this is how you do it. Very self-effect, standing on a flat surface.
But the other architects could have said, well, we could have done that.
And that's right. That's what most likely they told him. And he says, yes, you could do the Duomo too if I tell you how to.
So if he told them the plans, they'd say, oh, we can do that.
Because in a way, for him it was rather simple. And according to the, say, tradition, to the legend we may call it, he got the commission, just with this stroke of genius.
So when Brunelleschi got the job, he got a big hole with it, didn't he?
This is what he found. The job was to fill with a roofing this huge void above us.
So that was a hole.
There was a hole, and it was the largest hole actually in Italy at that time, because this was the largest building in Italy.
Well, how big was the hole?
We're talking about more or less about 130 feet diameter.
How tall?
It's about 370 feet high. And you have to understand that this boulder we are looking at, in a way, for medieval men and also for the Renaissance men, signifies the dome of heaven where the God dwells.
It must have been a mess in here, with the largest cathedral in Italy and the largest hole above it.
Yes, indeed. And can you imagine the problem for the liturgy too? The main altar is set right where it is now, and the priest had to say mass with pigeons flying around and experiencing bad weather, rains, hails, and most of all, no actually plans for completing the whole building until Brunelleschi arrived on the scene, actually.
But he left no documents, no designs, no blueprints for what he did he?
There are no drawings surviving from the building of this dome.
And we've not known all these years how he did it.
And we're still debating on the process used by him in order to center the whole geometric shape of the octagon above us.
This is interesting, but not really too much information. How he designed this dome of interlocking bricks.
Under the shadow of the dome. Florentines don't say they get homesick, they say they get dome-sick. And that to be called a real Florentine, they must have been born under the shadow of the dome. What did that dome do to the imagination of this city?
Indeed, what it did to the imagination of mankind. But when the Florentines were singing, I like to be there. When it was finished, and they saw from below. Now here we see it's closer, it's on our level.
Franco Zeffirelli, the filmmaker and director, was born in Florence.
When they saw it, I'm sure man knew that there is no limit to man's power and creativeness. Every man has pride of what he was doing.
This is the director of Drew's all-time favorite of Romeo and Juliet.
The most humble worker was so proud of himself. That's why we achieved such incredible things. Otherwise, they're not conceivable. It's not because we had great artists necessarily. To begin with, the great artists were the top of the iceberg. You realize that Michelangelo was considered the best marble cutter in the world. Not the greatest genius, the greatest artist. He knew how to sculpt marble better than anyone else. He was paid for that, not paid because, he was Michelangelo. Only later in his life, when he was about to die, it was invented for him the word genius. No one was ever a genius before him. They were just very good and very skillful workers. How do you account for this striving for the perfect essence of Florence has always been the pride of being part of God incarnate? It was what every Florentine feels with pride. That's what made the Renaissance so strong, because every man said, I can do things because I'm God. That's humanism, that's Renaissance. But people understand that clearly. It's not Leonardo, Michelangelo, or that which is the glorious conclusion of Renaissance. The beginning was these people who found out clearly what the essence of existence was. The pride of being part of God.
This is a really cool visual. We're going from the religious center We'll be tracing down via cows, and
To man,
then we'll
says
see
one Florentine philosopher,
the Civic
it
Center.
is granted to have whatever he
Piazza
pleases,
Signoria.
to be whatever.
that's a cool shot. We're looking down the Duomo there. Okay, yeah, so best way to glorify God is to recognize our God-given talents and use them. That's our new way of seeing things here, especially once we get to the high Renaissance, but we're not there yet. We got to do some more late, early, and first of all with some more Botticelli. What's the name of this painting? Do you guys ever use the term primavera?
Yep.
Like when you make
Spring pasta?
pasta primavera? There we go. That's where we get the term from. Ah, there we go. There's the birth of Venus. Have you seen her before?
Yep.
If you haven't seen her before, you will realize how much she's out there. You'll start noticing her. Western civilization loves this painting. Ad people, advertisers love to use this painting for different things. There was a American Express ad a few years ago where Martha Stewart was tiling her pool with dead, and the scene she was tiling, she was creating with her credit cards. But
And you said that was Botticelli?
this is Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Birth of Venus. Yeah, there she is, coming out of the sea foam, standing in her scallop shell. And so Botticelli is giving Lorenzo de' Medici the nudity he wants, totally, and also giving him the Neoplatonism, because even though she's nude and all that, and she's the goddess of sexual love, she's still got that reserved quality to her of the Madonna, rather than a luscious. So Lorenzo will feel more comfortable looking at that than he would if she was looking a lot more earthly. That is kind of the ultimate expression of individualism, because it's a self-portrait. That's Botticelli. That's Botticelli's self-portrait. And I don't know if you can really see it there, but I'm kind of, maybe it's just because I know the story, but I see kind of a little bit of the tortured person that he was. Because he was, on the one hand, he wants to be painting these, that things are coming from him. It's not just because he's being commissioned by Lorenzo de' Medici. And at the same time, we know that he's feeling great guilt. He's one of those artists that's really struggling between what he wants to do and what he's been commissioned to do, and at the same time how church officials are making him feel. The church is going to eventually get fully on board with all these changes, but in this period, some church officials are and some aren't in a big way. And one of those, what happens is Lorenzo de' Medici dies, and there's a power vacuum, and in that power vacuum steps in a monk, also who you can actually see his cell when you go see San Marco Monastery. But the monk is Fra Savonarola. Hard to even write his name without seeing his angry image. The painting that we have of him is so dark and brooding, and it just kind of, it's like the artist just captured how dark he was. Fra Savonarola, who has taken Florence by storm. So once again, Lorenzo de' Medici died, left a power vacuum, and in that power vacuum, for a moment, is Fra Savonarola. And what he's doing is he's really playing on these artists' guilt. Now, some artists it doesn't work on them. The very young Michelangelo is coming into his own. But someone like Botticelli, who has already had a lot of doubt about what he was doing, oh my goodness, does it work on him? And what Fra Savonarola does is he builds a huge bonfire in the Piazza Signoria. And he calls the artist, he calls the bonfire of the vanities. And he calls the artists to bring their work and to throw their work on the bonfire. And Botticelli does, and other artists as well. Botticelli, is such an amazing artist. Luckily, the Medici family isn't going to let Botticelli grab at the works that they've paid for. So The Birth of Venus, Primavera, all that with us to this day, but there's plenty of works that Botticelli destroys on this bonfire. It's painful to think all the art that we lost as a result. Now, what happens is Florentines eventually get a grip. What do you call a place that's ruled by a church official? Florence for a brief time was a place ruled by a church official. What is that called? What kind of government? There's monarchy, democracy, oligarchy. What's the term for when the church rules? Theocracy. Yeah, and for this brief moment, Florence is a theocracy, and eventually the Florentines figure out that that's not what they want at all. So they seize power back, and guess what they do to Fra Savonarola? Huh?
Throw them in a fire.
They build a bonfire in Piazza Signoria, and they burn him alive. And you can go to Piazza Signoria today and see a plaque that marks where the bonfire of the Vanities was, and then where Fra Savonarola was burned. So that's a site in Florence today. Well, what I've got to do now is hand you over to Drew, who would like you for about a half an hour. We'll pick up with this guy. Ghirlandaio. Ghirlandaio is where we will pick up. So we've done Botticelli. We've got a little bit more Francesca, Bellini, and Ghirlandaio.
So are you done with Savonarola?
Am I done with Savonarola?
Yeah, are you going to talk more about Savonarola?
No, but you can talk more. Oh, you brought a bunch too? You want me to bring?
Yeah, the fire
oh,
of the
yeah.
Vanities, I've heard that.
Well, it's a famous title of a Tom Wolfe book.
Okay.
Yeah, so he got it from Fra Savonarola's.
Somebody asked Sarah a couple questions about Bonfire of the Vanities and Savonarola. What happened to Savonarola in the end? Did you tell them that?
You weren't listening.
No, I wasn't.
He got burned in
He
a
wasn't taking careful notes.
fire.
My feelings are hurt.
The Florentines.
All right, let's talk
power
about
back.
Ghirlandaio.
What year
Okay.
was that?
Bonfire of the Vanities. We're in the 1492.
Oh, the same year Columbus was out
Yes,
sailing around the world.
totally coincidental.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really 1492 is a funny year. It's the year that the Spanish ousted the Muslims, which is why Isabel and Ferdinand were ready to bankroll Columbus, and it's also the year that Lorenzo de' Medici died and Savonarola took over and built his bonfire. And those are completely coincidental.
There was a whole lot
The
more.
rejection of the Muslim, or the expulsion of the Muslims, and in Spain, that was not, in Columbus, that was not coincidental. But yeah, let's look at Ghirlandaio. This is we've got a good number of these late early Renaissance paintings, because you can stand across a room in an art, if you know that you're looking at Italian Renaissance art, you can see telltale signs and know that you're looking at art that was painted somewhere between 1470 and 1500, late early Renaissance art. First of all, I mean, this is a portrait of a man and his grandson. So we don't know exactly who, but this has come down to us. This is a lovely painting, or a very loving painting between. Oh, that's not nice. In terms of what was going on with portraiture, you can see that we're getting a lot more interested in capturing the humanity of the scene. So hopefully everybody's getting to their Ghirlandaio here, because I'm using this time. It's the only time we'll look at this painting. And you know, the artist is capturing the man's not perfect features. Clearly his nose has been through the ringer. But we're stop that. But we're trying to.
It's like a husky.
We're trying to learn.
My
Can't
goodness.
help it. I just can't help
What
it.
you're gonna do is make him Max Scherzer from the one really bad. I want Cookie. Poor guy. But I'll see if I can get anything accomplished here. So we're seeing a lot more
See,
human.
I'm asking you to do this because I need this board. I'm taking my board
Well, I know, but you
Somewhere
can
we
write with me talking about the painting,
go.
can't
All
you?
right, talk on this side.
Okay, but here's that's actually good. Here's the way you can really tell. Look at what's happened with the artists. They've learned distant background. They've learned distant background. So we've got foreground and we've got distant background. We're making big strides, but we haven't figured out how to marry foreground, middle ground, and background. What's keeping Ghirlandaio from having to, from not having to show what he can't do? Well, this is a window.
Yeah, he made everything in the distance behind the window and made the people real big in the front. so-
Well, I know that, but there's distant background. What keeps him from having to show the connection between foreground, middle ground, and background? Yeah, the window sill itself. So
Yeah.
having a window having it be a window rather than just them, being in the foreground and just being able to see middle ground and background. Late early Renaissance artists, that's going to be the final breakthrough that's going to take us into the High Renaissance. So are we there?
We're there. The alternate name of the picture is Hitler's ancestor.
Oh my goodness. Now you're getting really nasty.
So we spent the last 2 weeks strategizing for the last time this semester, strategizing in terms of specific content areas.
Just another way.
You can leave it there. No, it's just fine, actually. And that's what this class is all about, strategizing. We're finishing up our time together, but hopefully you take away useful strategies into the future. As we're closing in, what we want to think about is being strategic and figuring out what's left to do and how do I figure out to do it, particularly in terms of content you don't know how to develop yet. In this essay, however you develop them is completely up to you, but there's 4 content areas that everybody's essay needs to direct their attention to and develop to some degree. Everybody needs background and context. We talked about that a week ago Tuesday. How are they different? What do they overlap? What kinds of background and context information are generally needed? And more importantly, what's specific to your needs? Talked about description last Thursday. We looked at different kinds of description and talked about the role description can play in writing. Tuesday we got to historical significance. The piece we haven't really talked about together yet is travel information. For many of you, that might be a pretty minor add-on to your essay. It does need to be addressed in some way or another because you're writing for an audience, the readers of Historical Traveler magazine, who want to be able to not only read and learn from your essay, but in some way, travel and experience your subject. Once again, in some way. For some of you, that might be super easy, super direct, okay? We can go see the thing you've been talking about. Others of you are going to have to work on that a little bit more creatively, okay? But everybody needs to touch on those and develop them. Piece we want to add today that we don't really talk about this semester yet, and it's a good time to talk about it, is not just in terms of looking for sources through keyword searches. That's really what we've emphasized up to this point. That's the vast majority of what to do in the future. When you need information, okay, or you need ideas, you're going to use keyword searches. Most people start with the internet, but the same kinds of word searches work in a library card catalog, an electronic card catalog. You use the same kind of keyword searches to find newspaper articles, magazine articles, books, obviously films. You can use exactly those same kind of combinations and keep trying different kinds of combinations as we've talked about all semester long in searching, okay? The same kind of keyword searches will be useful to you as you go on in school and you use more advanced databases, and you'll use them. Electronic databases search things like professional journals, okay? Which you're not normally going to find in a regular public library. At a university level or in graduate school, that's the kind of stuff you'll really be searching for and reading. Professionally published stuff, okay? For specialists in the field rather than generalized subjects. Some of you have done it. Some of you have found those kinds of sources. We haven't talked about them because they're not necessary for the kind of searching you're doing. What we want to talk about today is thinking about sources in a slightly different way. Not how to find specific sources, but thinking about kinds of sources and how they might be useful. there's three basic kinds of sources for the kind of writing you're doing, which is historical writing. Okay, to some degree or another, you've got to find out, well, what happened in the past to supplement your own knowledge. Primary source, if you stay in the field of history or anything like it, you know, any kind of liberal arts in school, you're going to be doing more and more primary source use. We haven't talked about it because we haven't needed to do this yet. Anybody know what a primary source is? We've mentioned it before, but haven't discussed it really. What's a primary source?
Have you read a primary source in this class?
And you can answer that either of those ways. What is it, or do you have any examples of sources you're familiar with? Primary source. You think primary.
You have read a primary source. I'm going to do that.
Go ahead, Peter.
Themes.
Okay, so a historical document was written when?
Right.
At the time. And I'm going to rephrase that a little bit. A piece of primary source material. And with history, we usually talk about documents because history is based on the written word, right? It's of the time. It was written at the time. So what primary source documents have you read in this class?
Something that was written by people of the time.
And at the time.
We read part of the,
You know what? That doesn't work on a couple levels. It's interesting thinking. Yeah, it's a work of fiction, first of all, absolutely. And Homer is writing the Iliad about events in the distant past. So if we look at that historically and using archaeological information, Homer's writing the Iliad 400, 500 years after the supposed Trojan War.
And it's a religious text.
Yeah, and it's literature and religious, and we don't know that the Trojan War actually ever happened. It's an interesting thought, okay? But we're really talking, when we say of the time, so for there to be a primary document about the Trojan War, okay, what would we have to have, which we don't have? Agamemnon's what?
Agamemnon's journal.
Oh, exactly. Journals, diaries, anything recorded by a person of the time, living at the time that you're writing about, and typically writing about the subject. Who's doing Pompeii in here? When you've been reading about Pompeii, have you come across this guy's name? Pliny the Younger.
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about Pliny the Younger. I thought you had. Perfect. Pliny the Younger was living at the time of Pompeii. He's living across the Bay of Naples. He and his uncle see the explosion, okay? His uncle goes off to rescue people and dies, right? He's overcome by the sulfurous fumes in the air, and he dies of his lung poisoning, if I remember correctly. Pliny the Younger, his nephew, wrote about what happened. He writes a description. Have you used it?
wait.
Okay, great. He writes a description of the explosion. He sees the explosion of Mount Vesuvius. He sees what's happening in the aftermath. He talks about what his uncle is trying to do and how some people survived and most didn't and stuff like that. So what makes Pliny the Younger a primary source? He's there at the time and he's writing about it at the time. Okay? What if Pliny the Younger had been telling stories to his children and grandchildren, and his granddaughter Amelia is nicknamed Pliny the Youngest, okay? But she's 2 generations later, and she's heard granddad telling stories about the explosion of Vesuvius.
That'd be secondary?
Okay, is it a primary source any longer?
No,
Why not?
because she wasn't there.
It's not of the time, okay? Yeah, it might be a secondary source, or it might be somewhere in between. Okay, that's one of the things we want to talk about here is kind of the gray factor, but it's definitely not a primary source. What's the value of using a primary source? Why would you, first of all, want to look for, if you can find it, primary sources? And let's think about kinds of content that you're going to be developing in this essay.
Credibility.
Okay, but in terms of kinds of content, what could that lend credibility to? That's a good point. But where might you use somebody like Pliny the Elder, who's writing about the time about your subject?
Background.
Why background? Okay. Pliny the Younger is probably not going to talk about in his letter that he wrote. This is actually a letter. He's probably not going to talk about, you know, the period of the Pax Romana and the 5 good emperors and that kind of background, is he? He's talking about more immediate context.
Yeah.
The immediate context of what's happening where and when. So it's not deep, big background. It's much more likely to be that context of the moment in time. Caleb.
I was going to note, so earlier in the semester, when we were covering the Greeks, I brought in Christian Myers. So Christian Meyer is a modern historian. The mindset of people at the time during the Peloponnesian War. He also, there's the Golden Age, and he also covers the way classical as well. He works a lot with Aristophanes' Lysistrata. So, you know, that's for him a primary source.
Right.
So.
And that's where this stuff
So
comes in.
that's what I was trying to. So you guys have read a primary source in this work.
Is
Herodotus.
Herodotus and his history of the Persian Wars. Is that a primary source?
No.
Why not?
Since he goes around and asks people in interviews.
But what about
Yeah.
the Thucydides?
Okay, we're not talking about Thucydides. Herodotus. Is Herodotus a primary source? No.
No.
He's gotten his sources from participants and people who were there at the time. Caleb, what were you going to say?
It might contribute to a description as well.
Mhm.
I mean, if it was an eyewitness account, they were describing it then.
Pliny the Younger describes the scene. What can you do with his description of the scene?
Use it.
Bring it into your own description, absolutely. And that's where I would absolutely quote a source. Somebody who's there on the spot. Primary sources are great for quoting because they're writing at the time. They provide the perspective of the time. What about historical significance? In general, what are 2 big ways we can talk about historical significance in terms of time? Exactly. Short term and long term. Remember we talked about the Battle of Agincourt and its short-term historical significance, very short-term historical significance in the 100 Years' War. What was the short-term significance of the Battle of Agincourt? I've got one right now. Short-term significance of the Battle of Agincourt. Very short-term. English, okay, or they do get to go home, they're safe, but even more importantly, the victory.
Yeah, that it boosted morale.
Thanks. All right, or they get to go home, boosted morale, but what does it represent in the 100 Years' War for the British? English. It's a huge victory. It's the high point in the 100 Years' War. Remember, Henry gets to marry the queen of, the daughter of the King of France. He's essentially setting himself up to be the King of France. This is a tremendous short-term victory. Long-term, what happened to with the English victory?
It was only like 5 minutes.
Henry's gone in 5 years, worthless son. No, he's young.
Yeah.
He's young, he grows up to be worthless. Long term, it's not meaningless, but it doesn't have much significance in terms of the 100 Years' War. Does it have other long-term historical significances? Absolutely. Okay, so thinking in that way, how might a primary source help you with historical significance? Thinking long-term or short-term, where's it going to be more useful? Probably. Short-term, white-term. Why?
Someone at the time writing about Agincourt isn't going to realize that this is showing the obsolescence of knights.
Yeah, here's what happened 100 years later.
Yeah, you can probably only use it for short-term historical significance. Is it useful for that? Potentially very useful. You see what we're talking about is, what we're really talking about here is strategizing. And could a primary source help you with modern-day travel information?
I don't think I like just looking down that brown thing.
Yeah.
That's why I keep doing
Oh,
it.
okay, great. Potentially helpful with travel information? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of use my imagination and come up with a primary source that would be most helpful. Well, let's keep that open.
Right now.
Yeah. So it's of the time by a person of the time. Okay? By a person connected in some way. So what about Thucydides? Thucydides, what's the name of his book? Old Greek Things, I think is what it's called. What's the Thucydides write? What did he write? Peloponnesian War, okay. Secondary, primary. Why primary for Thucydides? Okay, he's a general, he's experienced what he's writing about. That big old book though, is that only his experiences? Probably not. What else do you suppose he's probably doing writing the Peloponnesian War? You think he's using some records? You think he's, okay. That's something we kind of stopped talking about primary sources. Primary sources can be things like diaries and letters, but they can also be official government records. In more modern times, they can be newspaper accounts, because winter newspapers published
At the time.
at the moment. So it's the immediate coverage. Again, it reflects the moment in time. So there's a wide range there. I'm thinking Thucydides is probably a combination of both. He is primary, he can draw on his own experiences, he can talk to people at the time who are experiencing it very soon thereafter. So he's writing it while the Peloponnesian War is still going on, right? When did he finish it? After the war?
400.
400, okay, so very soon.
Well, I mean, he didn't finish it.
Oh, that's right, it's unfinished, yeah.
Yeah, he dies at 400, so.
So what's a secondary source then? Okay, so it's not first-hand experience, it's not first-hand knowledge, it's second-hand knowledge.
Nothing read somewhere else.
Okay, so it's somewhat distant from the subject, right?
If I told you about the Thucydides work.
Right. Yeah. When Gavin was at the battle of it. Yeah, right. So if you're telling me, well, let's think about that a little more. That's an interesting example. It is distant. Distant in terms of what? What's the most important distance, probably? Okay, and yeah, from the events it's about, the subject it's about. What probably makes it more secondary more than any other factor?
That it's not right now.
Yeah, of the time, distant from time, okay? Caleb, what were you gonna say? Time, okay,
So
great.
would that be more like the Iliad then in secondary?
The Iliad's a work of fiction. Let's drop the Iliad out of this subject because it is a work of fiction. It's a made-up story about a non-event.
Yeah, the Greeks believe
Yeah.
that. but-
Yeah, we're talking about non-fiction works. I'll clarify that now. Yeah, the Iliad is a big old story. And if there's some connection to the truth, it's probably more luck than anything else. So,
Yeah, I'm in the school that doesn't believe it actually was a Trojan Horse.
I believe, not the Trojan
I mean,
Horse.
remember the Iliad.
I believe there's something.
The Iliad
but-
involves gods, and goddesses.
Yeah, and the only information we think we have about the Trojan War is some very, very scant archaeological evidence. And some of it, little tiny bits, 3 pieces of
And most of it was
story,
destroyed.
yeah, that connects to the archaeological remains that we call Troy today. Okay, so it's distant from time. How distant from time? If we're talking about Herodotus, the very first historian, as a secondary, not a primary source, when is he writing about Persian Wars? What's that? Yeah, it's really just the next generation. It's very soon thereafter. So, somebody writing 100 years later or 2,500 years later, which is about as far as we can go, can they still be secondary sources? Absolutely, because what makes them secondary sources? If the distance in time is at least they're not of that time, but it starts as soon there and then goes indefinitely in the future, what are they drawing upon? Yes, exactly. Good secondary sources, real secondary sources, typically draw on primary sources. Okay, so that's what a historian does. Whether it's Herodotus, Thucydides in some ways, or a historian of the 21st century, they're going to know as much as they can about their subject. They're going to read lots about it, but the history writing that they do is going to draw on those primary sources. Okay. Doesn't mean they won't read secondary sources, but they're going to draw their information and their insight, their new contributions to that study from primary sources. That's why it's so easy for Herodotus. He's the first historian. Everything he's writing about the Persian Wars is new, okay? But he's the first secondary historian of the Persian Wars. But if somebody writes a book about the Persian Wars today, they're going to go back to some of the same sources that Herodotus used. Reinterpret them, look in different ways, look for new information, okay? Look for sources that Herodotus didn't have. A secondary source is typically drawn from primary sources, but what's going on? What is this secondary source doing with those primary sources? You're reading a bunch of stuff, you learn everything as much as you can about the subject, and you read what people of the time wrote or records of the time say. What are you doing with it? You're compiling, absolutely. You're putting it together. So a primary source usually shows what kind of perspective. What kind of perspective is a primary source? First person, the person who wrote it, right? So a secondary source that draws on a bunch of primary sources is going to show what kind of perspective? Well, and from how many points of view?
Several.
As many as possible, right? Absolutely. It's not just one person's view of events. You're going to draw on as much information, as many primary sources as you possibly can. So it represents, that's one of the things that's going on in the compiling. It's compiling multiple perspectives, multiple views of events. When people are looking at the same event, do they have the same perspective? Do they have this, provide the same kind of information and ideas? No. So what else is going on with the compiling? Compiling's absolutely right, but what are they doing to make sense of it? When you take information and give it meaning, you want to explain something, which is exactly what you guys are doing. What's a historical word we can use for that? When you try to give meaning and understanding to the past. That's exactly the right word. Interpreting, or interpreting is verb interpretation. What does interpretation mean? And what are you doing? You use your own understanding, your own knowledge, your own experience with that subject, and you give it your perspective, your slant, your view. Have you guys read any secondary sources that provided interpretation for Sarah? Have they read for you, or have you told them about, and they've read any secondary sources that provide clear interpretation, where they're putting their opinion on something?
Like McKay.
What's that? We'll get to McKay.
Yeah, we haven't
gotten to McKay yet. We'll get there though.
They've read historian quotes.
Yeah.
They've worked with quotes from
I'm thinking,
secondary sources, works of history.
okay. And I'm thinking in particular about I. Claudius and the views of some of those characters. They're like Livia and what happened in the Julian Claudian family. Did you read or talk about any? What's that? Tacitus.
They learned about Tacitus. They didn't actually read Tacitus.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So we just talked about it. You learned about it. What did Tacitus do? Was Tacitus the primary source historian? No, he's after the fact.
He's writing down the
Yeah, and is he providing an interpretation of what happened at the time? Absolutely, absolutely. A very,
Skewed.
yeah, very skewed and very strong
And
interpretation.
then we talked about Suetonius being much more.
Yeah, so you got Suetonius and Tacitus, but they're both secondary historians, right? They're both writing, even though it's fairly soon after the fact.
Not
this-
Madsen, really.
Yeah, they're bringing their perspective. They're using their knowledge, using their information, drawing on primary sources, and bringing this. This is one of the things that's most valuable. These two are some of the most valuable aspects of secondary sources. They compile lots and lots of other sources, and then they interpret them. They tell you what it means, you know? Where are secondary sources going to be helpful in terms of your content? Can they be useful for background and context? Absolutely, because in writing about these subjects, what are they going to have to learn themselves and probably provide for their readers? Background and context. All historical writing, and most writing of any kind, needs to provide background and context. You're doing the work for you, right? Description? Sure, absolutely. An example, how? What does Suetonius and Tacitus describe, for example? What's that?
Politics.
They describe politics, the political discourse and interchange. They describe people, Livius. They describe events, right? They probably don't have much description of places, but they might. Historical significance? What does this do? When you're doing this, what are you doing? You're providing historical significance. This is the most important thing secondary sources do. They provide meaning and understanding of the subjects they're writing about. Does that make sense? This is their ultimate goal. You know, if you're a working historian, that's your big job, to contribute something to our understanding of a subject. So if you want to find out what the current historical interpretation of something is, you find current, modern secondary sources, because this is why they exist, okay, more than any other reason. Travel information? What's a tertiary source?
That's an R. That's
Tertiary.
T-E-R.
Tertiary, yeah.
I thought it was a
T-E-R.
V.
Tertiary. So primary sources are of the time. Secondary subjects rely mainly on primary sources to provide a new interpretation. How far are tertiary sources from the original subject? Way far. In what ways?
They're like in the future.
Okay, they're definitely down the road. So definitely in terms of time. You don't have tertiary sources even close to the time. What were you saying, Randy? All right, so secondary sources rely mainly on primary sources. What do tertiary sources rely mainly on? Secondary sources. Why? It may not be available
Well, the secondary source people have done the work.
Exactly, exactly. What's an example of a tertiary source that you've read this semester?
A source that's using a lot of secondary sources.
What's that? Cultural and Values is a classic tertiary source.
As
At
is Western
McKay,
Society.
textbooks are tertiary sources. Absolutely, absolutely. They look at a lot of information, everything that's been published, and produce what kinds of information. What characterizes tertiary sources? Are they highly specific to a subject? No, they're what? They're more general. Yes, absolutely. That's their purpose. Not to tell you everything, all the details about ancient Rome, but to break it down into categories. Here's the period of the Republic, here's the period of the Empire. Okay, so more general. All right, does it mean they don't have specific information? No, but what can you count on with general sources like this? How much of your subject are they likely to cover, your specific subject? Small amount. So if they don't touch on it all that much, what is their greatest value, do you suppose? Allison? Well, they can certainly do that. That's one of the great values of tertiary sources. One of the best values of a tertiary source is they have bibliographies that tell you which secondary sources they're using, and occasionally primary sources. But where do you think where's an obvious place, content area to use tertiary sources for? If they're more general, what's that? Okay. They may not talk about your specific subject, but they're definitely going to provide historical significance for the context of your subject. They may not spend a lot of time on Trajan, but you think they're going to talk about the 5 good emperors? Absolutely. So they might provide you a larger understanding of historical significance. Does that make sense? Other subjects they might absolutely. A couple of people are writing about the Crusades. Do you think textbooks write about the Crusades? Do you think they talk about why they were important? Absolutely. But they probably talk about the Crusades in general rather than maybe the first crusade or an individual crusade. Description? What do tertiary sources have that might help you with your description? They're probably not going to include a lot of textual description, absolutely. But what are they probably going to include? Pictures, illustrations. And what can you illustrate with some kind of graphic? You can do pictures of, right, people, places, things. What else? What other kinds of illustrations are in your textbooks?
Maps.
Maps are in your textbooks. Charts are in your textbooks. Absolutely. They're full of illustrations. That's why they charge you so much money. That's why Sarah gives them to you for free. They'll charge you $100 in the bookstore because those illustrations and the glossy print is all kind of expensive. How about significance? When we talk about significance, description, how about context? Absolutely. They're all about context. You know, you don't have background context for your subject, start with the tertiary source. Textbooks, what else? Textbooks are the most obvious for us. What else? Used to be people that came by the door and they knocked on your door and said, I'd like to sell you a set of encyclopedias, and they weighed 1,000 pounds, and we've still got some in our upstairs.
They were sweet.
I love them.
They were so sweet.
Are our textbooks, our encyclopedias obsolete?
No, they're just available online now.
They've moved online.
Unfortunately, the really good ones are, you still have to pay for them.
Yeah, the best ones like Encyclopedia Britannica, you do have to pay for. But yeah, encyclopedias are the classic tertiary source. Textbooks are the classic tertiary sources. There's so many kinds of websites out there that are very general websites about subjects that are kind of similar. They're not encyclopedias, they don't cover everything, but there will be like more specialized, like ancient, there's a million websites about ancient Rome. There's a million websites about ancient Greece
Going
that
back
are
to
more
Britannica
general.
and Americana, people will think that they're free, but they don't realize that they're only seeing small scraps of the entry.
Yeah, right. You get like a paragraph,
Yeah,
concise
you
paragraph.
get a small amount free, and then but the vast majority of data you can't get to without paying for. This is true.
Yeah, because they paid for access.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
Use your public library.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking we need to. I could keep going, but I want to go ahead and give them a break.
Okay.
Thanks.
Could I pick them up right after the break and continue this for like 10 minutes? and then you can have them as long as you need them? Okay, all right, because I think at this point, because I do need 10 more minutes. All right, so you guys take a break until no later than 1:44:44, okay? You guys, be back by 1:44:44, not a second later.
We're going to be watching Rick
1:44.
Steves and Travel Tips.
Yeah, it's 1:34 right now, so 1:44.
We only get 10 minutes?
Oh, you guys want more than 10 minutes? That's
Please.
right. How long do they get? Well, how long is your break?
Well, you
35
wait 10 minutes
minutes.
over, so.
My other classes only get 10 minutes.
So 2 minutes out.
We're special.
We pick up at 2:08,
Thank you.
right?
That's
2:08, not 2:09, not 2:08:02, 9021.
Okay, I'm gonna go check. I've been in the
Yeah,
editor's
let's-
email all day, so I wasn't in my own, but yeah, that's weird.
So that which is the glorious conclusion of this. The beginning was these people who found out clearly what the essence of existence was. Pride of being part of God.
Okay, so we've been watching Rick Steves' Europe Through the Back Door, the very first video he did, and it is based on the very first book he did, Europe Through the Back Door, which to this day is the traveler's Bible for meaningful, inexpensive travel. And I was very lucky that in that 1985 trip, I was going off, I was dumb and young and just, I was getting on a plane with my bike and nothing. And my mother, wonderfully, went to her bookstore nearby in Charlotte, North Carolina, and found this, and then zoomed down to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was getting on to give me this. And it was everything to me on that trip. I read this book so many times. He comes out with a different copy every year. A different edition every year. This is for 2006. The reason I've got this one in my office is because it's signed by him. But we've actually met him a few times since over the years. But yeah, my original one, it's red and it's all beaten up, and it sits in a very special spot at home, and I would never take it out of the house because I don't want anything to happen to it. But it's where you want to start when you travel. And you'll just find yourself having questions as you're traveling, things, whether it's laundry or whatever, and this will so help you. And then what you want is you want to get more specific books. If it's Europe, you definitely want Rick Steves, and like Rick Steves Rome, Rick Steves Paris. So he has city guides, he has country guides. City guides are incredible because they include tours of the museums, and they're all updated every year. So when you get that museum, you'll know he's funny. But then the other company Drew and I never traveled with just Rick when we're in Europe. He only does Europe. Lonely Planet does the world. We would never travel without whatever Lonely Planet, wherever we're going. So like just now when we were in Belize, we had our Belize guidebook. Guidebooks are wonderful. We have a guidebook to Michigan. We actually have several guidebooks. It's wonderful having some to read, and they have not been replaced by the internet. The internet, my God, I'm the mad Yelper and TripAdvisor when I'm traveling, but nothing's. They make shows, TV shows on public television. Yeah, and so does Rick Steves. Rick Steves makes TV shows for public television, but even better, radio shows on public radio. Just absolutely incredible. All right, so there you go. Let's now get back to our late, early Renaissance with painting and in the High Renaissance. This is, once again, our Ghirlandaio. And as we go through these, you'll see how common that distant background is. This is later Francesca. And when we're continuing that theme of the increasing interest in individualism, in capturing individuals, their personalities, this is the Duke of Urbino, a northern Italian city-state, so he was the ruler of Urbino. He's powerful, he's tough, he's strong, and that's what Francesca wants to get across here. What's keeping Francesca from showing that he can't do middle ground? We got foreground and distant background, and we're trying a little bit. You can see them trying, but he's not really confident. But what's the main thing that keeps him from having to show middle ground? Yeah, he's so big in the painting. They just on the little corner is there a little bit. You can see these artists making attempts at marrying the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. This is Giorgione. We've actually left Florence and we've gone to Venice for another Renaissance artist. This is entitled Madonna Reading. And what's happened to our Madonna as we've been going through time? She's aging. Yeah, we're becoming more interested in her as a full-blown womanly woman. And by the time you get to the late early Renaissance, we're comfortable with that. We've gotten there with that. How about the baby? Baby, he's got some serious ab muscles there. And he's just kind of sitting there on that ledge. And she's not concerned at all. She's reading. And he's like, almost looks irritated. You know, why are you reading rather than, you know, making sure I don't fall off this ledge. So babyish in many ways, but always with that sense of self that a baby wouldn't have. Here's another thing to point out. These artists have gotten so close to the High Renaissance. There's a major technique they haven't figured out yet, and you'll see these hard lines creates an aura of unrealism. So they haven't figured out that you don't want to ever have hard lines like that. Where it just wouldn't be. So that's something that a High Renaissance artist figure out. The High Renaissance artists are the ones that take us that final step. So that's Giorgione. Bellini, there's Bellini, another Venetian. And once again, like Duke of Urbino, Madonna. The Madonna is keeping him from having to do middle ground. How are we doing with the baby? He's pretty gosh darn babyish, but and she's literally praying over him. He's Christ the God, not the baby. You know, she's literally praying. He's totally on his own. You know, looking very babyish in that way. He's sleeping like a baby so often does. But the fact that he is so on his own, and she's praying over him, Christ the God, not the little. Done all those babyish things that babies do, like sleeping and all that. Here's another Bellini, and once again, we're flirting with middle ground. Most of this is taken up by the figures. What is the subject? What is the subject? I've given you the term. Pietà, exactly. So in this case, Christ has been taken off the cross. And in terms of sculpture, we are working more with learning musculature. This is actually the teacher, Leonardo da Vinci. The artist, the sculptor is Verrocchio. Who's the figure here? David. Once again, Goliath has already been slain. He's at his feet. But you can see, unlike Donatello's David a few decades earlier, we do know more about musculature. We're learning. We are doing the ultimate in illegal, absolute taboo, punishable by death, paying grave robbers to unearth recently deceased bodies. Dark of night, then, when no one, we are dissecting bodies. That's how inside, what's underneath that highly illegal thing to do. Not just by, just in terms of lay law, but church law is what made it so highly. Okay, well, I think that the dude that's got to take us into the High Renaissance is none other than Michelangelo's David. And unlike Donatello's David, who's already slain the Goliath and who needed God, couldn't have done it by himself, this guy can do whatever he wills. He hasn't even done it yet. He has not slain Goliath yet. That's what he's looking at. He's looking at the giant, and he's saying, I can take this guy. Now, before we go any further, let's place David We are in the Piazza Signoria, and there is David right there. So that's what you want to know, is where David was, and I will say no more. I'm going to let's let the film do its thing, and then we will talk more about the slides. Okay, and watch as we're going from the religious center to the civic center to where David is. So David, right there in front of Palazzo Vecchio, and the film is going from, doing an aerial view from the religious center to the civic center down Via Cassioli.
It is granted to have whatever he pleases, to be whatever he wills. It was an audacious aspiration, and it summed up the spirit of the city and the age. A young Florentine sculptor caught that spirit at the beginning of the 16th century and embodied it in a statue commissioned to stand in front of the town hall. His name was Michelangelo.
It must have been an awesome sight when they hauled that 16-foot statue right here in this piazza.
Yes, it was fantastic. They constructed a wooden cage in which the David, which is 14 feet 3 inches, you would forgive me, was suspended in this huge wooden cage so it could swing a little but would be secure. And a gang of men pushed it through the streets from a few blocks up there to the Piazza del Duomo to the Piazza Signoria. And just imagine this huge biancone, as the Florentines call it, the huge white figure, floating, swinging in this, and being pushed. It took 3 days to bring it 3 blocks.
What's the significance of it being here in the public center of Florence?
This piazza is the civic center of Florence, as the Piazza del Duomo is the religious center of Florence. This piazza is filled with what we would call today almost patriotic art, propaganda art, not art for art's sake. The Judith and Holofernes right over here by Donatello, who cut off the head of the enemy. Holofernes is the heroine of her people. The David means the hero. The Florentines took this as a great symbol of power on the part of what seemingly weaker force against a greater force. So that throughout the 15th century there were many, many, many commissions for Davids. But this one has a curious history too, because it was commissioned 60 years before Michelangelo got the work. It was commissioned, the artist had this awkward block, 14 feet high, 9 braccia, measured according to the braccio, what we call cubits in Old English, from ear to ear. 9 braccia high, narrow block, and a sculptor tried to work it, couldn't get anywhere with it and abandoned it. It lay in the workshop of the Duomo for 60 years. In 1501, they had a competition. And Michelangelo was in Rome at that time. His father wrote to him, "Come back, there's a chance for a great work." Michelangelo was then 26 years old. He came back, he was given the commission, he locked himself up in a workshop, he didn't let anybody in, including his brothers, and over a period of about 18 months, succeeded in doing this work.
You think he looked at that block and saw the figure of David in it?
Yes, I think he did. Michelangelo believed that the statue pre-exists appearance. That is to say, within the block there is the David. And all that the sculptor does is remove the excess. But to reach that point, one must have la man che obbedisce all'intelletto. One must have the hand that obeys the intellect.
What do you think when you look at that, Sidney?
I try not to see the copy.
That's a copy.
And that, of course, is a copy. And no copy, even those made with the most technological skill, is the original.
Let's do slides, say a little bit more, because we're about to get into another a very interesting aspect of the High Renaissance. So we're now with the masters: Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Titian. And they are the ones that have mastered realism. I mean, they could do photographic realism before there was photography, 500 years before there was photography. They're not going to be interested in absolute realism. They're going to be, but they can do whatever they want to do. They've completely mastered how to take a flat surface, paint a three-dimensional world on it, and how to sculpt perfect human beings. And they're really into the balance of that golden mean. So as you see, these artists perfect technique. They're now able to paint and sculpt following the balance of classical Greece. So they're very into that. They're going to be very into that through the High Renaissance. And then we'll see them start getting a little bored with that. But right now, they're really guided by the last of the last great moment where we'd gotten to the point of having mastered technique, and now we're really into that balance and restraint and whatnot of the classical ideal, or the golden mean. And we completely broken free of the guilt. And there Michelangelo can paint a David who doesn't need God. A man can do whatever he wills. He's looking at Goliath. He's saying, I can take that guy. We have complete understanding of musculature, and anything that you can see on the surface of a muscled body, you can see on Michelangelo's David. So we are confident. We've completely broken free of the medieval tie, the medieval kind of umbilical cord, the angst and concern about whether we're doing something wrong that was so early Renaissance artists. Completely done with that. We've broken out. But there's this interesting aspect amongst these people, like Michelangelo, where it's kind of like, yeah, and then, oh, and kind of this realization that means life is a whole lot more complicated, that you don't have the easy answers. You know, medieval man had the easy answer. He knew, it's all part of God's plan. There's nothing for me to do but then to trust and have faith. And then as we were breaking away from that, there's been a lot of angst. High Renaissance, we are sure that we've gone in the right direction, and at the same time, we're realizing that means complicated, and that's where we've been ever since. This is taking us into the early modern world, which takes us into the modern world, which is very, very complex, unless you're our neighbor Bob, and you stick with that medieval worldview. So that's what we're going to start playing around with now with our film watch. Oops. Pick it up. So we're looking at David and all of his confidence.
Is the original.
The heroic ideal of David was the ultimate expression of Florentine optimism, a belief in the divinity of the human being. Created in the image of God, now man was creating images of himself. Contained in the marble was the mirror of the soul. We needed only to free it as Michelangelo had liberated David from the block. But what does it bring, this gift of freedom? Certainly the ability to dream and the power to achieve. But perhaps, as Michelangelo had seen, it also leaves us standing alone to make and face our fate.
And what I'm looking for there then is what I was just talking about, the realization that yes, we have so much ability to determine our world. It's all up to us. And at the same time, then there's this, let's this point. So we're moving to the gold sheet, the next questions that are all about this realization.
Creation,
Knocking on the head.
I like to think of it as the monument to despair in Michelangelo's life, as a great creation of pessimism, of incapacity to act. I think it's one of the magnificently saddest places I've ever been in.
So we're on question number 1 on the gold sheet.
It was no consolation for his knowledge that while freedom inspires great aspirations, great suffering also attends it. This genius who created godlike man also confronts us with the image of death.
This is a mausoleum for the Medici family. Eventually, it wound up as the burial chapel of two most mediocre of the Medici, namely Duke Jean Nemours, who married a French princess, Giuliano, the son of Lorenzo Magnifico, and over there, Lorenzo, the grandson of the great Lorenzo, the Duke of Urbino. Michelangelo fulfilled the commission for the Medici and then proceeded to make it his own when he was criticized that this figure did not look like the real Giuliano de' Medici, who had a beard, among other things, didn't have a swan neck like that. His reply, scornful, was, "Who will know or care what they look like in 100 years?"
Well, he was right.
He was right, because the artist was now more important than the patron.
Yes, the artist is now not working for great lords, but is himself a great lord. Michelangelo, for example, reached the stage when people would beg to have a sketch by his hand. What was the subject? The patron said, doesn't matter the subject, so long as it is by Michelangelo.
What does this say about the Renaissance to you? This ultimate triumph of the artist over everything else?
It would say a great human victory were it not for the fact, and this is, I think, crucial, were it not for the fact that this great human victory of assertion of the self, expression of the self, coexists with terrible melancholy. Well, just look around at these figures. The artist was expressing his deepest feelings about time, about death, about immortality. One of his poems has the line, vorrei volere quel che io non voglio, I would want to want what I do not want. The Renaissance was a period of affirmation, but with this undercurrent of negation. You hear it in Renaissance music, by the way. You hear it, almost all Renaissance music, even when it's written allegro, supposed to be happy music, it sounds to our ears almost in a minor key. It has a sense of melancholy. There's a great strain of melancholy running through almost all Renaissance art.
There was a sense of something lost.
Oh, yes. A sense of moorings lost. A sense of the fixed scale of not only of values, but the fixed scale of where one belonged in the social scheme. After all, I would say it was easier for medieval man to face death with the secure knowledge that he was either going to heaven or going to hell. But it's more difficult to die and not know where you are going. That is to say, doubt, ambiguity have entered the world. There's much Hamlet here, 100 years before Hamlet.
To be or not to be.
To act believe or not to believe.
So that melancholy aspect of the high Renaissance is what we were just working with there. Exciting and at the same time very daunting, huh? Well, I don't know. It's just complicated. You know, we live in a complicated world. When you think you've got all the answers, it's a lot simpler, not nearly as full and productive, but a lot simpler, and we're not there anymore. All right, so a few more angles of David saying to Goliath. Travel tip, you absolutely want to go see David well before you can. In other words, going well before, Drew and I, first time we saw David, we got here about 7 in the morning. It was not opening until 8. We got out. That is what had happened. So we'd been standing right here, and sipping coffee and munching on a little breakfast munchie. So when the gates opened, or when the doors opened, we just went right in.
When we went in, we had the David to ourselves for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because the people behind us was a semi-comatose tour group of college students from Ohio, and they kind of shuffled in, moved, and Sarah and I got in, and were amazed.
That's about 10 minutes into it. Yeah, I'm now surrounded by people.
From Ohio.
And other places. But yeah, it's I mean, people from all over the world come to see the David, and you do not, that line is so long, it wraps around the building. It's wrapped around the building.
Another strategy is to go late. Often people are catching on to the early strategy, but if you go late, if you go to the last hour that something is open, you'll often find the lines are gone. We don't do that much, but we're going to do more of that.
We're totally morning people.
Yeah.
By late afternoon, evening, we're drinking wine and not. But if you're more of an evening person, that's going to work for you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's do some Leonardo da Vinci. I think that this is probably the most humanizing of the divine. Remember, that's what we've been doing. We've been humanizing the divine as we've gotten more and more comfortable with the human story of these religious figures. What is completely gone with Leonardo da Vinci's, well, that's true. We'll talk about that too.
Halo?
I'm sorry, the halo is completely gone. And as you'll see, some high Renaissance artists get rid of it completely. Some still have it, but just very lovely. But Leonardo da Vinci was so completely comfortable with humanizing the divine that he got rid of it altogether. This is called The Virgin and Child with St. Anne. St. Anne is Mary's mother, so this is kind of like the ultimate family scene where Mary is sitting on her mother's lap, and mother is looking lovingly down at Mary and child, and the baby Jesus. And the baby Jesus is completely the child. He's being restrained by his mother. He's being watched over. She's looking at him with the mother's love rather than to this kind of removed reverence. He's a little boy. And yes, as Amy noted, the hard line is gone. Leonardo is using a technique of the High Renaissance and beyond called sfumato. They use it. They really like to create this dreamy quality. So this is what I meant by it's not like you're looking at a High Renaissance painting and feeling like you're right there, because they definitely are creating this kind of ethereal quality. But when they want to show just something, looking at it as though before there's photography, as though it's been photographed, you can look at detail like the ground here that their feet are on, and realism. I feel like I'm going to pick up one of these rocks. Thank you.
Is that a lamb?
Yeah, it's the sacrificial lamb. And if, and we're not sure if he was notorious for not finishing work. He was so he's a Renaissance man. He's interested in everything. We'll talk about that in just a second. So it's possible that he just didn't finish, or that he was being artful by leaving the background unpainted. But you can see a total comfort with foreground, middle ground, and background. So They can do it all. And in painting, they like to capture that balance as a triangle. So the lamb's little butt here is balancing out Mary's butt here, so it all fits this triangle. Virgin and child. Leonardo da Vinci was interested in everything. Once again, he's thinking way ahead of his time as he makes designs of inventions. What's he thinking of here? Yeah, we won't actually see the first flights until the early 20th century, early 1900s. But he's thinking about it hundreds of years. He's left behind tons of sketches that Bill Gates has bought, owns a lot of them. A lot of these have been turned into little models. You can go and see them. They travel.
So is that like a PC on wheels?
Well, I hope that this never came, the flying machine, that's one thing, but can you tell this is a war machine, can you tell what it is?
I thought it was Windows 95.
It's a people mower. So, so it's mowing people. You see the people are all chopped up like blades of grass. So let's hope that no one ever tried to take that one, but not
you made a riding people mower. I'll bet it would sell. One is a riding people mower like Bob drives next door. Doesn't have a helmet.
Oh, like John Deere?
Yeah.
The John Deere version.
Ooh. This is the ultimate expression of what I've been saying that we were going to get to, where the artist is as interested in capturing the inside as the outside. This is his very famous Mona Lisa, which, by the way, when you see it in real life in the Louvre, which you probably won't be able to do because there are so many Japanese tourists that are, and it's small. It's not that small.
It's like 12 by 18.
But it's surprisingly small, and which makes it that much harder to see when you just waves of.
And just a couple of months ago they did some more.
Another photograph?
Well, not a photograph, but another painting.
Yeah, I don't know why people have been so weird about this one. Everyone, for the longest time, there was this whole thing about how who is this person?
That's only in the United States.
Yeah, and then it's a half image.
It's been just pathetic. And History Channel has done all these shows about it. They did one where they proved that Mona Lisa was actually a self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci.
What?
Yes,
Yeah,
there was a whole
as a
show
woman.
where they proved it, that it was actually a self-portrait of him painting himself as a woman because he might very well have been gay. Of course, being gay and wanting to look like a woman are completely different things. But anyway, so it's just been weird. We've known all along who she was, but finally, no one can legitimately raise any questions anymore. Is Lisa del Giocondo, wife of Francesco del Giocondo, a Florentine businessman? In a statement on Monday, the college said its library expert Armin Schlechter found the answer in a copy of the works of Cicero, where in 1503 Agostino Vespucci, a official and friend of Leonardo's, wrote in the margins that the artist was working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. Surprise? For centuries, the Mona Lisa has been known in Italian as La Gioconda, though anecdotal evidence pointed to Giocondo's earliest original. So, the Italians have always known, but for some reason, we decided to make it a mystery.
It's going to be a conspiracy theory.
One of history's mysteries. Yeah. So let's talk. What's going on here? You look at her and you can see what she looks like, but what is the very famous question that you are asking yourself?
What is she smiling at?
What is she smiling about? Mona Lisa's smile. What's going on there? So that's it. You're getting, as much as the artist can do, you're getting into her head. She's smiling about something, and you're wondering what it is. What is she thinking about? So it's the ultimate expression, like I said, of that growing individualism, where we're now the artist as interested, if not more so, in getting inside the person, leaps and bounds from that portrait that we looked at mid-early Renaissance by Uccello. We're talking about sfumato. Try as one might, they cannot find the beginning, the lips and the end of the face, or vice versa.
'Cause
Raphael, another master. Now, what is Raphael, including in his painting, that Leonardo da Vinci is not including in his? Yes. Raphael his Madonnas are very womanly, very human. He doesn't dial back into the early Renaissance, but he does bring a certain level of piety to Mary. And you will notice, if you start looking at paintings of Mary since then, they look like this. I mean, most artists, when they paint Mary, are guided by Raphael. I mean, Raphael kind of gives Mary's face. His Mary just kind of, Western civilization looked and said, yep, that's her. This is called Madonna of the Goldfinch. You can see that triangle, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess I'm just looking for the balance. We have everything fitting into that triangle shape, so everything balances out. And John the Baptist, and playing with a goldfinch. The ultimate Raphael, Madonna and Child. Photographic realism, really, when you look at the feet, the way mom is cupping the babies, just everything about this, and Mary herself. It's so human and so real, and at the same time, there's a serene piety to it. And what's going on with Jesus?
his face is here. It is. His face and his hairline, he looks like an old man.
Old man at all.
I feel like he looks like he's
But
losing his hair.
what's he doing? He's such a baby. He's so being taken care of. He's so held. That's mama. You know, she's not worshiping him. She's his mom. And you can and he's holding on to her the way a child holds on to his mom. He needs to hold on to his mama, and his mama needs to be holding him up. But he's also doing what? He's gazing with a knowing gaze. Yeah, there's a knowing gaze there. So that's what I mean. I mean, it's totally the child, the mother, but Raphael wants to bring in a little bit something more, a complete human baby, and at the same time, there's a sign that this child is something special. This child, Madonna child, it's just Madonna child. Okay, let's get to one of my all-time favorites, talking about bringing it all together in terms of the basic elements of the Renaissance. This is Raphael. This is School of Athens. To see this, you have to go to the Vatican Museum, to see it in real life. You have to go to the Vatican Museum, and what you do, what the Vatican Museum is former apartments for the popes. And so when you're walking through the museum looking at the different rooms of art, you're actually walking through former papal apartments. And anyway, you get to one of those rooms and a whole wall, and by the way, I should note, by the time we get to the High Renaissance, the church has gotten in on this. They get it. They've accepted all these changes, and the popes have become big commissioners of art, big patrons of the art. So, so this is actually for a pope, and it covers an entire wall of this room. It's so cool to see it in real life. You got to do it. Once again, it's called School of Athens. So, talking about classical revival, he's looking at, and what he's imagining is all of these great ancient Greek thinkers that lived at different times. But he's imagining them all in the same school together, sharing their discoveries, sharing their scientific breakthroughs. So, that's classical revival. Individualism, as he's painting these figures, he's painting them as portraits of his contemporaries. So Plato was always he was always kind of looking up and philosophizing and thinking about the big picture. Aristotle was more about looking down and organizing and understanding the way things work. So typically, there's Aristotle pointing down, Plato pointing up, and yes, Plato is a portrait of Leonardo da Vinci. You can see by this point Leonardo is getting pretty old. And Michelangelo always felt really sorry for himself. His two big contemporaries, Raphael and Leonardo da Vinci, were always celebrated for their great good looks. They were good looking, they were charming, they were much beloved, people wanted them at their parties. Michelangelo kind of brought it on himself that he wasn't very popular, and he looked in the mirror and thought he was ugly. So he always thought that he'd been dealt an unfair deck. And so he just always was just kind of put upon, and he always took any kind of criticism really to heart. And so here he is, he's the philosopher Heraclitus, slumped over the way Michelangelo often was slumped over. The composition of the painting, so I'm talking about balance. When you page the art books, when you get to this, you can read about how each one of these figures is perfectly mathematically placed in relationship to the others, and each one of the figures, whatever movement you're seeing, there's another figure doing the opposite movement, so totally into that balance of the golden mean, so you can get really into all that. In the midst of all this hubbub, everyone's so excited to share, their breakthrough, their realization, their understanding. In the midst of all this hubbub, all this energy, all this intellectual energy, very quietly standing there and looking out at us. There he is right there, standing there amidst all the hubbub and just very looking at us.
Is that Raphael?
That's Raphael. Raphael his life basically spans the High Renaissance. He was born, he was a child before the High Renaissance, and then he was a painter through the High Renaissance, and then died toward the end of it. So he only lived to be in his 30s. Will always be young. Oh, that's a famous one. By Leonardo da Vinci, and once again, it's another one where you can read about how all the figures are perfectly mathematically placed and balanced. It's one of the great things to go see in real life. It's fantastic, and ever since that book finally came and went, it's not going to be hard to get into. It was a real bummer. We were guiding trips at that time, and one of our places that we guided was to Milan. That's where you find the Last Supper, and it had just been restored. And Drew and I had seen it and had a wonderful experience, but no members of our tour groups were able to get tickets. It was impossible.
All this information. Here's how to get tickets. Do it a month in advance. Single person.
And all of a sudden, these Dan Brown tours started just taking over. But it should be fine now. The book it was a stupid book, and hopefully it's gone forever. It's certainly not having the effect it did. It was in the dining room of a monastery. So it was where monks. It was painted in the dining room for monks to look at it while they were eating. Now it's a museum. But do go see it. It's fantastic. And it's been beautifully restored. But what's going on here is that Christ has just asked his disciples, or just said, one of you will betray me. And each one of the figures is saying, Lord, is it I? And they're all going, oh my God, I hope it's not me. So,
and where's Judas?
We've got, I actually have something that's kind of fun to do here. Let's see if it. It's not just you, because you must have read that stupid book.
I didn't want to read that.
Don't read the stupid book. That's what the stupid book is all about. It's a horrible book. And we're just not going there. We're just not going to lower ourselves. Instead, We're going to go to, I mean, if you're not looking for it looking like a woman, you don't see a woman. Yeah, I mean, you have to look for it and decide that it looks like a woman. It never occurred to me that it looked like a woman.
It didn't occur to me either till my
Yeah,
husband said something.
Dan Brown, yeah, exactly. And then you go, oh, and then oh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, but I didn't. But anyway, we are looking at a Michelangelo painting. This is on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where he's painting Old Testament scenes. You can tell what's going on here, right?
Oh, yeah.
What's happened?
They're being banished.
Well, first of all, they're committing deliberate original sin.
Yeah.
And then they're being banished. But what I want you to see here is that I think we're already seeing Michelangelo getting bored. You start seeing his figures looking kind of elongated and funky. I think he was already getting bored. This is high Renaissance. See that what's happening next is the masters have already perfected the techniques of realism. Now artists, including the masters, experiment in ways to express themselves. And you can see that one of those mannerists is none other than Michelangelo. Once again, we're still in the high Renaissance, but I think he was already getting antsy when he was painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Well, let's do one more high Renaissance master. Let's do our final one. We're not going to go fully to mannerism today. Let's bring in Titian. And this is a portrait of a man. And another one of those where this is just as much about getting to the inside as the outside. This man is strong, tough, and we can see it here. We can also see the absolute realism when they want to. I feel like I can walk up and take this coat, or at least rub it and feel the actual coat. You can see the sfumato arama. As you'll see on Tuesday, Titian will eventually paint a whole lot of women. And this is his high Renaissance version of this. And what we can see here is a complete comfort now with pagan, with painting non-Christian. And there's no Christian implication. This is Flora, the goddess of vegetation. But what it really is a pretty woman that Titian has pulled into a studio to paint and put on some kind of classical looking clothing. So the point is we don't need those Christian implications anymore. We're completely comfortable with non-Christian figures, with painting pagan rather than Christian figures. If that works for you.
Back to the pagans. And no questions for Sarah. We need to move on. So we were talking about the kind of strategy of finding sources, kinds of sources that can help you with kinds of content. You know, and this isn't a science. It's not 100%. It's not always going to be the case, right? I just got the fan on. Got the fan on. But if you think strategically about sources, it's often a whole lot faster to get where you need to be. Okay. Which content area weren't we doing so well with in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary? Travel, exactly. That's where we really sometimes just need to find specialized kinds of sources. If you're looking on the internet, keyword searches are going to find this for you. If you want to find travel information to visit Pompeii and Herculaneum, what are you going to do?
TripAdvisor.
TripAdvisor is a commercial site that provides hotel and airline information.
I
If you want about traveling.
Oh, I looked up tours.
I showed you guys this.
What if you want to travel there on your own?
I showed you this. I forgot to show you this. To the Delta College Dynamic Duo. Happy travels, Sarah and Drew. Except that he spelled my name wrong. Ruined it.
Mine's exactly right.
I know.
I wonder which of us he likes better. We tried to bring him out here to speak. We've tried several times, but he charges $10,000 on test. That's actually pretty standard for speakers. Yeah. And we've tried to get him at a discount. We've tried to. Nothing yet.
He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he's a really neat guy. But he's asked by everybody. He speaks constantly. He travels around. He does, and a lot of his speaking he does for free.
Because he fundraises for public television, which is really cool.
Right, he does libraries and things like that.
He's very generous.
Well, maybe he would come and help fundraise for our Delta.
We have a little
we're
station.
Not big enough. He goes to places well, we got him to do the.
sometimes we need to find special supply sources. Once again, keyword combinations is what's going to do it, you know. Problem is if you do like travel to Rome, travel to Pompeii, what are you going to get? You're going to get commercial, what's that? Everything. And everything is probably, the first thing that's going to come up is commercial travel sites. Probably, the Travelocity is the Wikipedia of travel, because it's just going to come up first because everybody uses it. But what's it going to do for you? I mean, you might be able to find some airfares, and they're going to pick some luxury hotels for you to stay at. But what is a real traveler interested in? Can people buy their own plane tickets? Can they find their own hotels?
Yep.
Yeah. What do they want to know from you as the authors of the articles in Historical Traveler? What do they want to know about travel? It's not getting there and where to stay and where to eat. What can you provide in your essays? What kind of travel information can you use? Will you use that's going to be most helpful to them? Stringer?
Once they get.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How do you see? Where do you see? How do you see the stuff they want to see? That's a little more challenging. That's often harder to find out here by the average tourist. You know, you can go to a travel agent, you can book stuff online. That's the kind of information they're going to want from you. Specific of how's the places you're talking about. And again, that's where we can use much more specialized. Now, I wanted to bring some printed stuff because we too often forget, you know, about printed sources. We're so locked into the internet, but printed sources are often much more in depth, sometimes easier to find, and often easier to use than websites, because again, there's just so much out there. I find the web sometimes less and less useful because it's information overload, or everything's so commercial. You know, if I, what was going on the other day? Oh yeah, we're going to take a bike trip this summer. We're going to ride our bikes from Berlin to Copenhagen, and so I was doing some little research of that, and I was just kind of checking some stuff out. And every time I go on the web now, these website advertisements come up. You know, do this in Berlin or go this or whatever. You know, it kind of takes over.
And then TripAdvisor.
Yeah, that's another one, right?
It's kind of taken over by this kind of bland middle class type. There's not a lot of adventuresome people who do. You know,
yeah, it is kind of the middle of the road
hotels
stuff.
For the wrong reason. You know?
Right. So don't forget printed sources. And a great place for printed sources is your local public library. Not so much Delta Library, not so much a university library, but public libraries are full of travel books.
Midland Library, man.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, there's just rows and rows. Travel books and books that you can use for travel, that are specialized books. This is what public libraries do really well. Books for the general public. So if you're looking for stuff and you're not finding it on the internet, you know, go on ValCat, which is the electronic database for all the public libraries in this area, including Delta College. Do a search for the kinds of books you're looking for, and you're going to find it pretty easily. Interlibrary loan locally can only take a couple of days sometimes if you're looking for something from a long distance, and take up to a week or so. But this kind of information is really easy to find in print. Let me show you some examples here. I went to my local library, also known as Sarah's office, and I'm looking for, this is big as a local library in terms of books. I was looking for sources related to my Capona. I'm still working on the Capona thing. Okay, so I went to this. This book is published by the Soprintendenza Archeologica di Pompeii. God, these people can't spell. Isn't that embarrassing? It's called Unpeeling Pompeii. So it's about the apples and oranges of Pompeii. Something like that. What do you suppose this is? Looking at the title, what do you suppose it is?
An archaeological.
It's an archaeological guide, okay? Again, we happen to pick it up there, but again, your local library is going to have it, and they're going to have the English language versions of these, okay? So I'm just flipping through, looking through this, and I hit a page called this. The House and Capona of Lucius Vetutius Placidus. What was that for a name? Lucius Vetutius, okay? And so you see a diagram here. And also, let me just start with the title, House and Capona of Lucius Vetutius Placidus. What is this about? If this is an archaeological guide to Pompeii, what have I just found in this description and in this chart? I found a real Capona that actually existed. And how do we know it existed? And how do we know it's a specific one, Peter? Yeah, somewhere in there, this guy's name appears. We can connect this Capona and house. So what does that probably tell you about Caponas and who owned them and where do they live? The very wealthy?
No.
Okay. If it's the house and Capona, this is an archaeological guide, and it's for the house in Capona, what does that
I
suggest?
would say that the Capona lives connected, not part of his house, and he's gonna
Right.
work on his home.
Probably the same building. Yeah, maybe two wings. Maybe the Capona is a wing out of the house, or maybe it's a small house, or maybe it's upstairs.
Well, just look at the diagram.
Yeah, Romans often lived upstairs of their businesses. That the business was on the ground floor, and people still do that around the world today. And then the family lives upstairs. So, what's that telling me already about Caponas? Where are they going to be located? Probably.
On the ground floor.
What's that? Well, in the cities. What neighborhoods? Probably. Maybe downtown. But I'm thinking also maybe residential neighborhoods. If people are living there, these are probably family neighborhood kind of places. I'm making some guesses here, but the fact that if there's a house connected to it, and the glare here is really bad, it says the owner of the establishment at the moment of the eruption, AD 79, appears to have been Lucius Petruccius Placidus, since his name is featured on different electoral manifestos painted on the facade. He's a guy who runs for local political office, and he's using the walls of his Capona for what?
Everything.
Vote for me, campaign posters. What does that suggest probably about his social class?
He might have been up there a little bit.
At least maybe middle class? Yeah, unless this is a really big structure, this guy probably isn't rich, right? But he's running for political office. He's got a building that includes a house and a Capona. How's he doing? Doing? Yeah, he's at least a small businessman, you know,
Upwardly
and maybe
mobile.
upwardly mobile, and maybe he's even upper middle class. Don't know. Okay, so and there is more information about here. Like they found the recent excavation found in. Let's see if I can read this to you. The Capona shop consists of a counter with 3 branches covered in polychrome marble, which contain a total of 13 large vessels. So there's 13 of those big clay amphorae. What does that suggest to you about the size of the Capona? It sounds like a restaurant, doesn't it? That's a lot of food. 13 of these things? I mean, how many of you work at McDonald's? How many French fries do you have? Only a couple, right? This has got 13 Caponas. This is a pretty big establishment. In one of those amphorae, archaeologists found 1,611 coins. Wouldn't that be awesome? With a value equivalent to 683 sesterces, an amount which, you remember that from Arms and Nemesis, an amount which probably corresponds to the shop taking of several days. That's kind of a week's haul. So, how'd they get in the amphora?
How'd they get what?
How'd they get in the amphora, the coins? I can't help but thinking he ditched them there as the volcano's blowing, and he's escaping the city. And he used one of the amphoras to hide a substantial amount of money.
Which would suggest that he probably died.
Yeah, analysis of the textile fragments adhering to these coins revealed they'd been stored in a cloth or bag. I mean, I don't know how much detail of this I can use, but is it interesting detail to find out?
Well, I suppose he could have survived and not come back because it was buried.
Yeah, right, yeah, and it would have been buried in ash at some point. So, I mean, this would make a great history channel, so the mysteries of what's his name,
Oh,
Capona.
God.
But
It's such a bummer that mystery and history rhyme.
how can I use that? How can I use what I just learned and from the diagram and from the text? Description for sure, I agree. Absolutely. Not only describe the building, the number of amphora, the size of the place, but also that it connected to a house. At least some of them were connected to the house. And the owners, in some cases, were running for political office. It also helps me kind of understand the social standing of these places, right? I don't know much yet, but what if I keep finding more Caponas like this, owned by independent business people, connected to houses or not, find out about their social standing. Will that help me maybe understand their historical significance?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another kind of specialized guide that's very, very similar, but different in its own way. This is called the Oxford Archaeological Guide. This is Oxford University of England, and they publish these guides for archaeological sites all around the world. This is for the entire city of Rome. Do you recognize the picture on the front? Temple of Vesta. Peter wins a prize. So if you look at these things, these can be incredibly valuable because they do all sorts of things. They'll take ruins like this. I don't know how well you can see this, but they'll take a ruin. So the dark part is the temple of the deified Hadrian. So Hadrian's been made into a god, okay? The dark part is the ruin of the temple that's left. What have the archaeologists who've written this book done? They've reproduced what the original facade would have looked like. Useful for description, okay? Several of you told me you're kind of having trouble with description because you don't know what your place looked like. You don't know, you don't have the details. Archaeologists will often do that for us. Here's something that might interest at least one person in the class. This is the column of Trajan in Rome, not the one.
Now it's St. Peter on the top.
Yes, exactly.
But it used to be Trajan.
Right. This is also a reconstruction. This is the original reconstruction of the original. Yeah.
So if he was going to use that in his paper as an image next to his text, then he would have to include something in an appendix.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Good question. We'll get there. Okay, so again, what these kind of specialized sources could do for you, even if your place is gone, there's often reconstructions that'll tell you how it looks like. And if you're really looking through the specialized source, you might find a ticket to the Colosseum from the year 2000, February 27th, year 2000. Spring break trip to, instead of going to Cancun, somebody went to Rome that year. And you can see that it cost, we entered at 3:48 in the afternoon.
Oh, that was before the Euro.
Yeah, and it cost 10,000 lira to go in. Oh my God. How do we afford that? $3.
It's $5.
Yeah, more like $5. It varied so much, right. Point is, specialized guides, specialized information could reap all kinds of benefits that other sources won't. And again, these aren't hard to find. I'm just going to do a couple more with you. I already showed you this book once. This was the one with the picture of the Capona. This is a ruined Capona. It's actually in better picture, better shape than the one, the ruin I was just reading to you about what's his name. But what's the value of a picture like this? It's just a picture and a tiny bit of text. This one doesn't have a name or anything like that, but what have you got? It's a visual. It's a visual.
I mean, it's a classic Capona.
Yeah. Right. It's a smaller one though too. If you
I've
count.
got better pictures. I've got pictures
Yeah.
of you. Dish it
Right.
out.
If you right. If you count the holes, they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and here's another amphora in the back here. So this is maybe a 7 amphora Capona. What does that tell me? If you got one over here, 13, that's connected to a pretty substantial house. This one's 7. What's that? Pretty busy. There seem to be a lot of them, and they vary in size, obviously, and stuff, don't they? So small businesses. Okay, I'm still looking for Caponas, and I decided to do a web search, and I searched. We use keywords. I use Pompeii's Caponas. Okay, so I want to do a little web thing here with you, and I couldn't believe what I hit. Asalina's Capona. And then here's the Italian, or maybe that's Latin. No, yeah, it's Latin. Capona Asaline. Wow. Yeah, what do you think I just found? A website for?
A Capona you could go to.
Another real Capona, because it's got a name, right?
Mhm.
Asalina?
And it was last updated, in 2006.
Yep.
Not like 1906.
Yep. So it's relatively recent. What kind of name does Asalina sound like? Sounds like a woman's name, doesn't it? Wow. And if it's called Asalina's Capona, probably owned by a woman? Whoa, whoa. Now I've got 3 examples of real Caponas, and what did I just learn, maybe?
That a woman owns a business.
Women owned in businesses in Rome. There's a lot of, right, or in ancient Roman times.
Maybe he named it after his mom. You never know.
Well, we'll see.
You have to go there now.
But then I looked further at this page, and it says the Capona of Legio, sorry you can't read it better, 20th Valeria Victrix, then it says news of, I'll read this to you, June 14th, 2004, Roman days, 2006, school demo at Virginia Run Elementary in Fairfax County, Legio 20 and the Capona at the University of Pennsylvania Museum open, and then at the bottom there's this picture, modern day people dressed as...
It was the day they had a toga party and pretended like they had a Capona.
So what is this group? What is this webpage for?
College.
What's that? Yeah, it could be college, could be a class. What it actually is, it's one of those groups of people that like to dress in old stuff, you know, like the guys who dress in Civil War. It's a reenactment group.
Yeah.
It's a reenactment group. What a piece of crap. I'm not even going to bother to look at this. But I did find it, so I stayed with it a little bit. They do modern day displays of ancient Roman stuff, ancient Roman life. As part of the reenactment group, the Washington DC based Legio 20th Valeria Victrix, we have expanded our displays to include the civilian side of Roman culture. We have researched the construction of a capona or tavern from an actual capona in Pompeii owned by a woman named Asalina, and we use this and other finds of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Ostia as a starting point. Did I just learn anything?
Ooh.
What's the value of this reconstruction group's website to me so far? Their research, not necessarily anything here. I'm not going to put these guys in my paper, okay? And I don't know, but I'm going to sure borrow their research, exactly what Emma said, and I'm going to keep digging a little bit longer. Seems like they learned there were many types of small taverns, bars, snack shops, and inns, and the distinctions overlap. It kind of reinforces what I was just learning, right? What we are building is a mobile tavern that can be carried to our events, blah, 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 I don't care about that. Okay, but they did do research, Emma, and what, you think they'll tell us where they researched this stuff? Oh yeah, here's a resources list. In addition to Legion members, we thank the following for ideas, information, and inspiration. Peter Connolly, author of an article called Pompeii. Some guy named Dr. Simon James, I can look that up, and I'll keep looking. And it says our display includes reproductions of glass and Samian ware. And then it lists these things: project building progress, food and drink, ownership and commerce, prices, clothing, including hand spinning, weaving, art, graffiti, and that's a link. What do you suppose they're talking about?
You have to click the link and find out.
Let's click the link and find out. Actually, these are just, okay, right. Above is the exterior of Asalina's Capona. Does that look like the reconstruction? This is the original, which is been moved to the Naples Museum. A lot of the stuff from Pompeii is taken over to the main city of Naples Archaeological Museum, so a lot of it's been removed.
You don't want to go to Pompeii without going to the archaeological museum.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Go to the
Make sure
secret
you go to the
room. The
secret
secret room. We'll tell you about the secret room privately.
Oh, that's detailed.
All right, contents of Asalina's in Naples Museum. If I go to the Naples Museum or look up about the information, what can I find out about Asalina's Capona? First of all, what did I just learn?
It was real.
It was real. It really exists. A woman owned a Capona in Pompeii. Does it look like a big Capona?
Not really.
4, maybe 5 amphorae? Even smaller example. That's kind of interesting. But I hope I come back to this graffiti thing because that intrigued me. Uh-oh. Wow. So places to eat in the Roman world went by various names. Below are some as used in Pompeii and Herculaneum. Sometimes they're called tabernas, papinas, caponas, thermolapium, or guinea, whatever the hell that is. I'm learning a lot about different kinds of caponas. This is the wall, from the wall of Asalina's Capona, which is in the Naples Museum. The above Latin menu is actually Habemus, insulin, pullum, pisum, blah, 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 blah. Shoppers, we have in the kitchen fish, pork, tacos, and peacocks. What am I learning about what they served at Capona's?
They serve peacocks.
They serve peacocks. This is all the food, kind of a meat heavy. They've got a, wow. I'm learning not only the women own them, they were different sizes. I'm starting to get some menu items, right? And there's some real graffiti from Asalina's Capona. And look what else is from Asalina's Capona. Here is a sample of Pompeii graffiti, okay? Right. The following election graffiti reproduced on the Capona is from Asalina's Tavern, as you can see below, though this quote is on the right side of the doorway. Note, okay, so women of Asalina's, and this is kind of paraphrased, are asking you to vote for Caius Lollius. Okay, so this is how it translates. But if I click on this link here, it takes me to more graffiti. This is all translated graffiti from the neighborhood of Asalina's Capona. Here's the translations. Oh, you jealous man who erases this, get sick. Pararius, you're a thief. Sammius Cornelius, go hang. A bronze jar has been lost from the tavern. 65 sesterces reward for whoever returns it. 20 sesterces for information leading to the apprehension of the thief and the recovery of the jar. Livia to Alexander. Hello, if you're well, I don't much care. If you die, I'll be happy. This is real Roman graffiti. Goodbye, Victoria, everywhere you are. Pleasant snores. Stronius doesn't know anything. Laticula's a thief. Serena despises Isidorus. I got your letter. Thieves outside, honest men inside. No loitering here. Take a hike, lounge lizard. You gotta be kidding me. Welcome what? Come on, let's eat. Well, I'm amazed that you don't fall down in ruins from holding up the silly scribblings of so many writers. And it's written in dactylic hexameter, which is what the Iliad was originally written in. It's a very structured form of meter and rhyme. And so was that all just for fun? That was fun. Background? Did we learn something about the people of Rome?
Yeah.
They just spoke to us. They spoke to us across 2,000 years. And their little scribbles on the wall. But are these generals speaking to us? Are they emperors speaking to us? Are they historians? These are the common people of Rome. Writing the kind of stuff that you might read what? You might read any corner of the bathroom over there, right?
No, we don't do that anymore.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Specialized sources have all kinds of values. Here's a very specialized source. You want travel information within Italy? Rick Steves isn't the only author, but since he pays us $1 every time we mention his name in class, don't use a 2001 guidebook, okay?
Always use the most up-to-date.
Public libraries are full of this stuff. What's the problem with the 2001 guidebook in Italy today? Yeah, it's kind of meaningless. But if you do open this guidebook, this is a wild day here, you find a bunch of pictures, okay? You find a picture of Stephen Saylor's Arms of Nemesis, and that somebody is holding up the book in ancient Rome. That's a Roman ruin in the city of Rome, in the Forum. Then somebody, okay, where's another one? Yeah. Okay, so then somebody takes a picture inside another old building of a person reading Arms of Nemesis. Here's a picture of Stephen Saylor being held up in front of a toilet in a jail cell. Sorry, the pictures are horrible. Here is a picture of Stephen Saylor's being held up in front of a San Francisco restaurant that Sarah and I talked about in this learning community probably 20 years or 15 years ago. Sam Mo's restaurant is in Chinatown in San Francisco. And here's Stephen Saylor's in front of Sam Mo's venue. Some student, some anonymous student mailed us these pictures about 10 years ago. They were in the guidebook. I hadn't seen them in a decade. Yeah.
That is so cute. And they didn't tell, we had another one, sent us a bunch of pictures from Edmonds, Washington, which is where Rick Steves is based.
Yeah, where his office is.
Taking pictures of his office and his store and all that.
And they mailed it back to me, no name or anything like that.
Nothing, we'll never know.
Weird stuff.
I had somebody else paint from I, Claudius. So there's Augustus, that's hanging in my office if anyone wants to see it. There's Augustus as a cat, there's Livia as a cat.
Is
really,
she a Siamese cat?
It's really cute. No, she's just she's not a...
As you're thinking about content, sometimes it's conscious. I need these kinds of content, I'm going to look for these kinds of sources. But be open to the accidental. Be open to running across stuff that you see, isn't that weird? And then figure out how you can use it. There's one other kind of specialized book I brought today.
I can't imagine what we were talking about Sam was.
Yeah, I can't either. But it fits into a slightly different category. And this is called, can you read that? The Road from the Past, Traveling Through History in France by who? Who says that?
Oh, God.
Here's the other category. This is the fifth category. Get this in your notes.
Is it nonsense?
This category of writing is called...
Is this one in my office or yours?
What's that? And you know where that fits?
Well, actually, it'll go back on my office shelves.
So you want to use the pictures of the graffiti. Or maybe you want to bring in an old photograph that you found in one of your books. Or even easier, you go to a website and there's an illustration there. Maybe it's a map. Maybe it's a photograph. Maybe it's an old drawing. Anybody tempted to bring that stuff into their text?
Yes.
Many of you already doing that?
Yes.
Okay. 2 ways to use illustrations.
Just wanted to show. So we were in Italy in 2000, and then we were in Italy in 2001, and we bought different new guidebooks. That's how much we obsessed with being up to date.
When they changed from blue to green, I hope there's other changes in the book.
Yeah, we've actually dueled with them, and sometimes we don't find very many changes, but usually.
After class, at the end of class.
Literally cannot move on until I wrote.
We can't
Literally, like I'm thinking about the entire time.
Well, you remember when we learned about the Herms, and there's something that we just absolutely. So the ancients had a lot of that stuff, and there's stuff that you and I would look at and go, oh my God.
Yeah, how weird.
Like a pan.
The goat.
The goat.
having relations with a human or another goat
In
or
a
whatever.
very graphic way.
In a beautiful statue, like in a marble statue, life size, that shows
they
all
found a lot of this stuff
anatomical
at Pompeii,
features.
and they so know that you and I, if we don't understand it, we'll sit there and giggle at it. So it's called a secret room, and you can go and see the stuff, but only if you take a tour.
You have to take a guided tour.
Where they explain it to you.
And they slap you if you smile.
And so that you don't sit there and just look at it ignorantly, and instead get the explanation and go, oh, okay, you know, I mean, and once you do, but if you and I just went and looked at this stuff without that context, we would just see some pretty nasty picture, pretty nasty.
There's a lot of, I mean, you know, in many societies, fertility, whether it's agricultural or human, is often associated with the male phallus. So what you get in the secret room is a lot of very large, erect male phalluses attached to all kinds of things.
Because it's supposed to fertilize.
Yeah,
everything.
well, exactly. It's all about fertility. Absolutely, absolutely. So the secret room is awesome.
They didn't look at that stuff and see, ooh, but we do. So we have to have context. They're not going to let us see it without context.
If you do go to Pompeii today, there's a phenomenon, and you gotta go, it's a requirement. There's a phenomenon you will notice, that you'll be walking, Pompeii's big, there's a lot of streets to walk down. I mean, you can spend all day there and see just a part of it. But when you're walking down one of the streets of Pompeii through the ruins, wherever you see a crowd, that means it's a tour bus crowd or a cruise ship crowd. And wherever the crowds are, that means inside that ruin, there's some kind of little pornographic picture or something that's been left on the wall. That's all they go
Yeah,
to see.
there's a brothel that has a whole series of
Yeah,
pictures
yeah, on
of
the wall.
different sexual positions.
Right. And
Is it
they're
still
amazingly good
operating?
shape. We haven't seen it because we wouldn't do such a thing.
It's a ruin.
Yeah, yeah, but the frescoes are still there. You can still see the paint and stuff like that. So the bus groups, they line up for an hour and they'll go in and they'll titter at the little pictures, which is why they don't let those people in the secret room.
But if
You
you
can go in the
wanted to
secret
use
room.
one of those pictures in our paper, you were telling us how we would go about doing that.
Exactly, exactly. Illustrations are not required. Have we
Is that
covered the
in
secret
home,
room?
Or is it in
What's
one
that?
of our offices, the pictures of
I haven't even, I have no idea.
It's either at home or it's...
Have we covered the secret room? Okay. You gotta visit the secret room. But you can't smile, no giggling. So illustrations are not required, but a lot of you are already doing it. Many of you have asked me about doing it, so let's talk about that. It's perfectly okay. It is perfectly legitimate, but there's three considerations you need to keep in mind. First is, how do you do it? Okay, there's two ways to bring in illustrations into your writing. We'll show you both ways. Two is, what are you using them for? And my main suggestion is never use them to replace anything you have to say. Use them to supplement what you have to say. So when you use an illustration of whatever kind, talk about it in your text and allude to it. Don't not describe something. Describe it and then say, as you can see in the illustration, this is what's going on. So you don't use it as a substitute, you use it as an enhancement. And third, you have to document them as a source if they're an outside source. If they're not an outside source, then you deal with it in a slightly different way. So, these days in the era of the internet, when you go steal stuff offline, off web sources, God, I hate this script. Okay. The best way to do it, if it's a small graphic, if it's a small illustration that you want to use, embed it into your text and put it next to the place where you're writing about it. Okay, so here's your text, and it says, where's all? Okay, words. This is all you. Where is all you? Right. Okay, here, now next to the picture, this is where you start the text where you're going to refer to the picture. So words that relate to your illustration should be adjacent to the illustration. And I've got an example. As the illustration right shows, French knights on horseback were vulnerable to King Henry's archers at the Battle of Agincourt. So you can see this is an actual photograph from the time that I've taken off the internet, and the photograph shows an arrow, one of Henry's arrows, bowman's arrows, coming down at the knight's horse. And this is a French knight, and this is, so this is illustrating the point that I'm talking about. And the key is, I'm making a reference to it. I'm connecting my text in the illustration. Okay, since this is a photograph from the time, what do I need to do with that picture?
You need to cite it.
I need to document it, just like I would document any source. I brought it into my text, okay? How do you document outside sources? Not courtesy of, don't need to do that. How do you document outside sources? With MLA. It's an in-text citation, that's all it is. It's just an in-text citation, just as if you did a quote. The only difference is, under the lower right-hand corner, leave a space, but under the lower right-hand corner of your illustration, put an in-text citation. And that would be either, what are the two things that can go in an in-text citation? Author's last name or the title. Exactly the same as another in-text citation. What if it comes out of a page in the book? You would put the page number. So it's an in-text citation like any other in-text citation. The only difference right here is there's no sentence, so what doesn't go after the in-text citation? Period. There's no reason for a period because you haven't built it in. Okay, I've explained some of that to you already. What if this illustration, what if this photograph is from a book that's already in my works cited? And the book is called Photographs from the Photographs in the Middle Ages. Okay, so I'm already using it. If it's already in my works cited, what does that mean for my in-text citation? It's the same. It's just an in-text citation, just like any other place I've used that. Does that make sense? What if this source, Photographs from the Middle Ages, is not in my works cited? I have to add it. Yeah, it's another source that goes in the in-text citation. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right, so no one has any problem putting a book called Photographs from the Middle Ages in your works cited.
But I have a question now, because...
Okay, that's different. Okay, this is for an illustration of some kind that you can embed into your text. Sometimes you want bigger illustrations. Sometimes you might want a full page, okay? Sometimes you might want to have a whole page with multiple illustrations. Sometimes you might want to make your own illustration, okay? Like this map of the Battle of Agincourt, okay? So this is a full-size map. Come on, focus in. So if I have a one-page appendix, and that's all I'm doing, it's called appendix, that's all, okay? And it takes up the full page. Sorry, you can't see this better. And it is a map. If you're making a map, if you're making a chart, if you're making an illustration, label it, all right? And then you do your map. This is really sophisticated, okay? If you made it, identify it. That's not an in-text citation because it's not in your works cited. You're just telling your reader, author map. One of your classmates is going to use photographs from some wild, crazy Eastern European country called Bulimania or something like that. Bulimia, okay? Budapest, yes, right. And he is going to use photographs that he took. Photographs that he took are like your knowledge, right? They belong to you. It's just like you don't document information you know, right? You don't document information that is yours. So those photographs, you can either leave it undocumented, but it's really better to say something like that. I thought about that further and looked it up. Say author photograph or author collection or something like that. That way you're telling your reader, it's mine. You know, I didn't get it from somewhere else. So sources, illustration sources, work just the same as any other source. One more thing. If let's say you want to have several appendixes, multiple appendixes, which doesn't sound healthy, but if you do, and you put them on separate pages, okay, then you would label them with letters. You have Appendix A, and the next one would be Appendix B, or Appendix C. Then what you would do, because they don't fit in your text, instead of saying, as the illustration at right shows, you would say, as Appendix B shows. So then your reader will read that, they'll flip back to the appendix, and the appendices, that's the plural, always go last. They go after your works cited. They're the very last thing. This is simple. It's not required, but it's often fun and interesting to do. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, exactly the same. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Here I put author map. I wanted you to be sure that this wasn't a professionally done map. Okay, that I had created it. But if it is from a source, it's just an in-text citation. Always in the lower right-hand corner.
From you don't...
I put author map there just so my reader knows. No. That's just like, that'd be like putting your own ideas and information into the works cited. You got all kinds of stuff to juggle here. You got all kinds of resources to use. As long as you meet these goals, I'm happy. And because you're fulfilling your purpose. Your purpose is multi-layered. It's complex. What I care about is that you fulfill it in ways that are interesting and complete and detailed and fulfill your own goals as well as the goals of the assignment. Kyle.
So let's say I want to put one of my pictures in appendix, or
You could do that if you want to be that detailed, but if it's obvious what you're referring to, you don't need to. Yeah, you can get more complicated if you want.
Are you gonna put more than one image on a page, though, like in your appendix?
On Tuesday at 12 o'clock, your final draft, revision memos, and text preparation record are due, so be sure to bring in the feedback you received, okay? If you have not asked for my written feedback yet, there's two more choices. One is give me a copy of your draft today. I will try to send you email feedback no later than Saturday. That gives me Friday and Saturday to do it. Or email me your more advanced draft. If you want to keep working, that's fantastic. Email your draft both copied into the message so I can make sure I can read it, and as an attachment, make sure your works cited is included no later than Saturday. That way I can email you feedback on Sunday. Okay? After that, there's no time for me to get you feedback. Once Monday happens, my life is over. Give me something today, email by Saturday. Very happy. We've kind of run out of time for conferences, but if somebody really wanted to do something, we could probably do conferences Monday. That would be the latest, though.
Were we supposed to do conferences?
Conferences are completely optional.
Okay.
It was only if you wanted. So I can do feedback and a conference, feedback or conference. I want to give you feedback on one way or another. The other handout is the last handout of the class, and I don't want to read it to you because it's all review, okay? And it's meant for this essay, but more importantly, it's meant for you to take into your future for the next 75 years. You're going to be in college, you're going to be writing papers, you're going to be in jobs doing writing, you're going to be in careers. When you retire, you're going to be writing for Historical Traveler magazine. Stay with me. This is a review of how we've approached finishing writing, okay? Reviewing content and personal goals. I'll ask you to complete those two sections. You don't have to do it right now, but I want you to use this. Remind yourself of the process we've used, okay? The most important goals to complete early are content goals related to your purpose. Then make sure they're working in a structure that is effective. The most important parts of your structure to look at the last time, when your content is complete, when you've said everything you want to say, go back to your title, introduction, and conclusion, and rework those so they frame the essay you've completed, okay? Then read the entire thing through from beginning to end, starting with your title, all the way through to the end, to make sure it all fits together, all your content areas are covered, and it flows. It's in a logical, natural order, okay? When you're done with content and structure revision, read aloud for clarity and source use. I think it's very, very important to read aloud when you are reading sources. You can listen for two kinds of issues that I've been able to talk with people, but I can't do that with the final essay. I'll just have to judge them as they are. You need to be very, very careful that if you are quoting sources, you need to use quotation marks. If you're not doing that, that's plagiarism. If you are paraphrasing too close to your sources, that your wording is very, very close, and including wording from your sources, even though it may not be in complete sentences, you're plagiarizing. Do not do that. If you plagiarize in your final essay, I have no option. I can't give it back to you. I will have to fail you on this essay. I will have to send a letter to the academic vice president saying this person failed because of plagiarism. Oh, quotation marks. So you're not plagiarizing with quotation marks. Yeah, right. But we have had issues in this class where people have quoted without quotation marks and way, way, way too closely paraphrased. Not enough. Not enough.
You got to put quote marks on it.
All the in-text citation tells your reader is the content of that sentence came from an outside source. It doesn't say the words did. Good question, though. Here's a review about what to edit for clarity when you're reading aloud. When you're reading aloud, like I said, check your source use, but also check documentation of sources. This is the third essay this semester. We haven't reviewed sources documentation because we don't need to as a class. This is one of the easiest things to get right. Get it right. It's super simple. Nobody's using weird and crazy sources that you don't know how to cite. And if you don't know how to cite them, use your handbook. If your handbook doesn't tell you, contact me. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Here's final text preparation, okay? Here's how to clean up no later than the night before, no later than Tuesday night. Do all the proofreading, print out your final draft, staple it. This is the last thing I'm going to leave you, but there's another strategy here. You can read that yourself. But one of the most important goals of text preparation is to produce a carefully prepared piece of writing that shows you care. Sloppy writing shows you didn't care. If the author doesn't care about a piece of writing, is the reader going to care? Absolutely not. Getting the easy stuff right is an important way of accomplishing that goal. You can have the most brilliant, beautifully crafted piece of writing ever, and if you don't get the easy stuff right, you can ruin it for yourself. because your reader won't take you seriously, which is a shame, but it's reality.
Did you give me 2?
Questions about this final discussion of this final essay? Final discussion is the class. I'm happy to help anyone and everyone individually. Tuesday at noon o'clock. What's that?
Is it in our?
There's a text preparation record. It's a little bit different. It's there. On Tuesday, your final draft at noon o'clock. That is not midnight. Noon o'clock, your final draft, revision memos, and text preparation record review.
It's in the.
This is in your schedule. Yep. Text preparation record is in the course map. It's a final proofreading guide. Yes, sir.
Are we bringing the notes?
You bring the feedback that was given to you. You got it in class. Bring that to class on Tuesday.
Yeah, this.
You will return that. Yes, you return that to your classmates, and same thing. Same thing as we've done with the first 2 essays. Exactly.
that?
What is what?
Where is that paper? Did you hand that out to us?
No, I'm showing it to you. This is in your schedule.
Oh, okay.
All this. This is just a reminder.
Okay.
Your schedule has all this information.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we will have discussion of firms, and they'll be taking reservations for tours of the secret room with the last 5 minutes of class.
The pornography book.
Right, and we'll arrange a meeting to review the pornography book of ancient Pompeii. Or if you have any questions, want to talk to me about anything, use the next 5 minutes for that. If you don't, you're done with me. What's that? No, these are not drafts for me to collect. Only if this is you brought your working draft today. Only if you want my feedback.
No, I'm gonna email it next time.
Anybody have a draft?
I know, right?
Tell the email address down. Right. Okay, but send it to
Sarah, you don't want our
your
grade books yet?
Okay.
Not till Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm not really set up to take them right now, so.
Okay.
Any other reads?
Okay, I have a question. I wasn't here, so do I just not do these? Or is there a way to find them online?
If you can find them online, I don't know. I mean, just, they're probably online, but I don't know where they are. Just, they're the David Macaulay Cathedral and Castle. Or, you were here for Castle, you just weren't here for Cathedral? Yeah, so I would just look for David Macaulay Cathedral.
Okay.
You could also ask some classmates to help you out.
Okay, and then I didn't get the orange sheet for the exam. It had like quotes or something.
Orange sheet for the exam.
It said it had like quotes on it from the movie.
Quotes from the movie. Oh, the film watching that we were doing film watching? So that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, the orange sheet.
Sorry.
Did you put your first things together? Oh yeah, that would just like, I don't, my brain doesn't know even.
I'm really doing it, but I need.
Yeah, please.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Right, exactly.
The text, don't go away, I'm looking.
Use that kind of wording. I mean, because you've got a subject that's ambiguous in terms of time, let your reader know that. So talk both theoretically, a little bit more.
And then, I haven't started it yet, but I've been looking at stuff about the so I found the Facebook, but it's the same, but they're not sure if it's right or not.
Wasn't it like LSCII or something like that?
Well, you can just say I don't know how old that one is.
Well, so you talk about it in that way, you know, that nobody knows for sure. People talk
I was at the
about
DPA
I'm sure you
last
would say
night.
it's
You're telling me this
love
was
that
never
little
heard
more
that
space.
even the civil defense.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to go, but
It was a major archaeological site.
if, everything is going right, I'm planning to
That was,
take all of my exams that I have to take in the PC center, I'll just do them.
well, that's cool. You
Maybe
do your advanced
I'm not gonna be here.
Oh, that's right, that's right. You've already talked to me about this. Yeah, just keep reminding me of what you're talking about.
I'm gonna try.
Start with this, say, Sarah asked me to discuss.
Okay, yeah, so Sarah
I'm gonna be on a
asked me to
plane because I am.
and I'm gonna be traveling. Are you on campus tomorrow?
No.
Okay, I didn't.
We are in Grand Haven tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes.
Have fun.
Don't forget your phone.
Oh, I'm not
Did you
that
have the journal today?
What?
Did you do the journal for today?
No, I just sent it to you later. I forgot to print it.
Okay.
Yep.